The night the great festival began, the whole village knew something would change, but no one could have predicted how much. As the moon rose high over the village, a masked stranger danced through the crowd, his movements graceful yet haunting. The chief's daughter, Amina, watched from the shadows, feeling an odd pull to him, even though she knew she shouldn't. Her father had always warned her against letting emotions rule her decisions, especially when it came to marriage. Amina had met many suitors, each one more impressive than the last. But none of them had ever made her heart race. There was Kwame, a strong and capable man who came from a respected family, but his eyes lacked the spark of true understanding. Then there was Tund, whose wealth could buy almost anything, yet his charm felt too practiced, too rehearsed. She had smiled, laughed, and even danced with these men, but deep down, she knew none of them saw her for who she truly was. They only saw the chief's daughter, a prize to be won. But tonight, as the stranger's eyes locked with hers across the firelight, Amina felt something stir within her, a feeling so intense it made her breath catch in her throat. There was no denying it, she was drawn to him. She couldn't explain why, but she followed him as he glided through the crowd, leading her away from the watchful eyes of her father. The mask he wore was simple, yet elegant, obscuring his features. But there was something in his movements, his quiet confidence, that made Amina feel as if he was the only one who truly understood her. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made her heart tremble. "You are not like the others, Amina," he said. "You are more than just the daughter of a chief. You are a woman who longs to be free." She froze. How could he know that? How could he see what no one else could? The words felt like a whisper from her very soul. And for a moment, she wanted nothing more than to pull the mask from his face and discover who he was. But that would be dangerous. Her father, the chief, would never allow it. He had already made it clear that Amina's marriage was not just about love. It was about power, alliances, and maintaining the family's influence. Still, the urge to learn more about the mysterious man grew stronger with every beat of her heart. Amina sat in her room, looking out the window at the sprawling village below. Her thoughts drifted back to the many suitors who had come and gone over the years. She had been courted by many, but none had ever touched her heart. Kwame had been the first to make her feel a flutter of something, but that had faded quickly once he started talking about the wealth he would bring into the marriage. Tund, the second, dazzled her with his charm, but his materialistic views left her feeling empty inside. They were both good men, she knew, but neither had made her feel alive. And now, with the masked man at the festival, she was beginning to wonder if perhaps she had been looking in the wrong places all along. The more she thought about her suitors, the more she realized how little they saw her. To them, she was a prize to be won, a daughter of the great chief Owusu, a symbol of power. But none of them had ever truly seen her, not in the way she longed to be seen. Amina walked through the halls of her family's compound, her thoughts heavy. Her father had arranged the meeting with Kwame, and soon after, he began making plans for a grand wedding. The entire village had been talking about it. Her father, Chief Owusu, was a man of tradition, and he saw no reason to waste time on feelings when duty was at stake. "Amina, you must marry soon. The village needs stability, and a strong marriage will ensure that," he had said. Amina hated those words. Stability? Duty. She had been raised to understand the importance of family and tradition, but she had always imagined that there was more to love than just political alliances and power struggles. Could she really sacrifice her happiness for the sake of tradition? It seemed as if her entire life was being written for her before she even had a say in it. The village began preparing for the great week-long festival, the largest and most important event of the year. Everyone was excited, dancers, musicians, merchants, all gathered to celebrate the harvest and offer prayers for the year to come. Amina found herself dreading it. Her father would be there, watching her every move, while Kwame and Tund would undoubtedly be among the many suitors vying for her attention. But despite the hustle and bustle of preparations, Amina found herself looking forward to one thing: the mysterious masked man who had danced with her at the previous festival. She wondered if he would appear again this time. That evening, after a long day of preparations, Amina sat alone by the window. She gazed at the stars, contemplating her choices. What would happen if she chose love over duty? She knew her father would never approve, but what was the point of life if it was spent living for someone else's vision of what was best? Kwame and Tund were both good men, she thought, but neither had ever made her feel truly alive. Was it so wrong to want a love that was more than just a union of power and wealth? The thought of the masked man haunted her. She didn't know who he was, but in the brief moments they had shared, he had made her feel seen in a way no one else had. The night was quiet, but her heart raced with uncertainty. She knew she would have to choose soon, but how could she decide between tradition and passion? The following morning, Kwame arrived early for a formal meeting with Amina. He was tall and handsome, with a confident air that came from being part of a wealthy and influential family. As the two sat down for tea, Amina's heart sank. Kwame spoke of their future with such certainty, outlining a life of luxury and comfort, but his words felt hollow to her. Amina couldn't help but compare him to the mysterious masked man. While Kwame spoke of power and status, the masked man had whispered about freedom and the soul's desire to be truly understood. Kwame leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Amina, you and I are meant to be together. Think of the future we will build, of the power we will wield as a family. This is your chance to secure your place in history. Amina nodded, but her heart wasn't in it. She couldn't help but feel like a pawn in a game, a piece on a board that others controlled. A few days later, Tund arrived, bringing with him more gifts and promises. Amina greeted him with a polite smile, but she couldn't shake the sense of discomfort that always settled in her stomach when he was around. Tund was everything her father wanted, rich, powerful, and well-spoken. But he never seemed to notice her for who she was. He only saw her as a beautiful prize to add to his collection. "Look at this beautiful necklace I brought you," Tund said, holding out a shimmering piece of jewelry. "You deserve nothing but the finest, Amina." Amina forced a smile. "Thank you, Tund. It's beautiful." He beamed, clearly pleased with her reaction. But inside, Amina felt nothing but an empty ache. She had long ago learned to accept the gifts and gestures as part of the game, but it never felt real. It wasn't love, it was an exchange. She wondered if any of these men truly understood the depth of her soul, or if they were simply after her assuming the title of chief's wife. As the festival drew closer, Amina became increasingly overwhelmed. Her father's insistence on her marrying soon was wearing her down. She would have to make a decision soon. But how could she choose between the suitors and the unknown man who had danced with her, whose very presence had made her feel as if she had come alive? She had never felt so torn. Zainab, Amina's closest friend, noticed the change in her demeanor. "You're not yourself, Amina. What's going on?" Amina sighed, sitting down beside her friend. "I don't know what to do. My father wants me to marry soon, and I'm not sure I can go through with it. Kwame is a good man and Tund is impressive, but neither of them. They don't make my heart beat faster the way the masked man did." Afia raised an eyebrow. "The masked man? You're not thinking of him, are you?" Again, Amina hesitated, then nodded. "I don't know who he is, but there's something about him that feels real. Something that neither Kwame nor Tund can offer." The first night of the festival arrived, and Amina couldn't sleep. The tension in her chest was palpable. She had tried to prepare herself for the suitors, but all she could think about was the masked man. What if he came again? What if they danced again? As she stood on the balcony, looking out at the preparations below, Amina saw him. The masked man. His dark figure stood at the edge of the festival, observing from afar. She felt a pull toward him, a magnetic force she couldn't ignore. As the festival began, she spotted him moving through the crowd, his movements fluid and graceful. Amina's heart raced. Without thinking, she moved toward him, her eyes locked onto his, and the world around her faded away. The music swirled around them as they met in the center of the clearing. The masked man reached out for her hand, his touch sending a spark of electricity through her. They danced, the rhythm of the drums guiding them, but it was as if they were in their own world. No one else mattered. There was no pressure, no expectation, only the moment. "Who are you?" Amina whispered, her breath catching in her throat. The masked man smiled, his eyes gleaming. "Someone who understands you." Amina felt a thrill of excitement run through her as they twirled beneath the stars. For the first time in ages, she felt free. The masked man had pulled Amina into a whirl of music and movement. For those few moments, it was as if the entire world had disappeared. There were no suitors, no expectations, no pressures from her father. Just her and him, in perfect synchrony, the drums playing an intoxicating rhythm. When the music slowed, he stepped back, but not without leaving a lasting imprint on Amina's heart. "Who are you?" she whispered, breathless from the dance, her heart pounding in a way she'd never felt before. The man simply smiled, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "The only man who truly understands you." Before she could ask him more, the crowd closed in, and the dance ended. Amina was left standing alone, her heart racing, searching for him in the crowd, but he was gone, vanished as quickly as he had appeared. The following morning, Amina was summoned by her father. She dreaded the conversation. Chief Owusu's face was hard as stone, and his voice carried the weight of the village's expectations. "Amina, it's time. The festival is over, and Kwame is waiting for your answer. I've arranged for you to meet him again, to finalize this marriage. It's what's best for the family." Amina swallowed, the words feeling like shackles around her. "But father, I don't." "No arguments, Amina. I have chosen Kwame to be your husband. You will marry Kwame, and that is final." Chief Owusu snapped. "We need this alliance to secure our future. You've had your fun with these games, but now it's time to act responsibly." Amina left her father's chambers in a haze, her mind still consumed by the dances and festival nights spent with the masked man, especially the last. Would she spend her entire life in a marriage of convenience? Was she to deny her heart's yearning? Days passed, and the pressure from her father grew heavier. The village buzzed with talk of the impending wedding, and Kwame visited more frequently. He tried to charm her with his gifts, his promises of a grand future, but Amina could not shake the feeling that something was missing. Each time she saw him, she felt more disconnected. Kwame seemed to be everything her father wanted. Strong, wealthy, respected. But with him there was no spark, no connection. He was a good man, but Amina had long since realized that being with him would be like living a life of quiet resignation, not the passionate love she had imagined. That night, as she lay awake, Amina thought of the masked man. Who was he? And why did her heart race every time she remembered their last dance, their last night alone? Amina stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the intricate beads and beads of her dress. The colors were beautiful, the design was impeccable, everything a future chief's wife would wear. Yet, when she looked at herself, she didn't see the woman she wanted to be. The marriage with Kwame loomed ahead like a dark cloud. Her father had made his wishes clear. She was to marry Kwame, secure her place in the future of the village, and produce heirs. Love had no place in her future. At least, not in the way she had dreamed of. But what about the masked man? She couldn't stop thinking of him, his eyes, the way his hands had held hers, his eyes, the way he smelled his embrace. Amina felt a deep pull toward him, something more than what Kwame, Tund, and the others had offered. She needed to know who he was, to understand the spark she'd felt in his presence. Amina's longing grew, and that night, she decided to take a chance. After her father's insistence that she meet Kwame again, she slipped away under the cover of darkness. She wandered through the village, hoping to find the masked man again. Her heart beat in her chest, and the village seemed to hold its breath as she walked alone. Then, near the edge of the festival grounds, she saw him, his tall form in the distance, a shadow among shadows. "Why are you here?" Amina asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man stepped forward, his face still hidden behind the mask. "I knew you would come," he said softly. "The pull between us is not something that can be ignored." Amina felt a warmth spreading through her chest, and her resolve wavered. "Who are you?" she asked again. This time her voice was more demanding. "Why are you hiding from me?" He paused before answering. "I'm someone who understands. Someone who knows what it's like to be trapped between duty and desire." The masked man's voice was soothing, but there was a sadness in it that Amina couldn't ignore. He reached up, and for the first time he removed his mask. Amina gasped in shock. Standing before her was none other than Tund, the very man she had felt so disconnected from. "Tund," she whispered, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. "But, I don't understand. Why the mask? Why?" Tund's eyes were filled with sorrow, and he stepped closer. "Because I knew you would never see me for who I truly am. You've always seen me as just another wealthy suitor. But I am more than that, Amina. I'm more than the man you think I am." Amina felt a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, anger, and a strange sense of betrayal. Why didn't you just tell me? Why hide? Tund looked down, avoiding her gaze. Because I knew. I knew that if I had revealed myself, you would never take me seriously. You wanted something more, something real. And I knew I wasn't that man when you looked at me. So, I became the stranger you wanted to find. Amina stared at him in disbelief, her heart torn between the man she thought she knew and the stranger he had become. Amina didn't know what to say. Her entire perception of Tund had been built on assumptions, and now that foundation was crumbling. You used the mask to deceive me? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. You let me dance with you, to feel something real, only for you to take it away like this? Tund, we shared intimate moments. Tund took a step back, his voice faltering. I'm sorry. I didn't know how else to make you see the truth. The truth that I am more than just a rich suitor, that I have feelings, and that you might be the one who could see me for who I am. Amina was overwhelmed. Her heart was in turmoil. She had spent so long hoping for someone to truly understand her. And here was Tund, the man she had dismissed as just another suitor, confessing that he understood her better than anyone else. The revelation left Amina reeling. She didn't know where to go from here, what path to take. Tund's confession had broken something inside her, yet part of her also understood the desire to be seen, to be understood. The journey ahead would be difficult, no matter which way she chose. Her father's pressure was mounting. The wedding with Kwame was fast approaching, and Amina knew she had to make a decision. Could she choose a life of duty and comfort, or was there a chance for a different kind of love, one that might be messy and complicated, but true? As the days passed, Amina wrestled with her feelings, caught between the weight of her family's expectations and the pull of her heart. Amina spent the following days in a daze. Tund's confession had left her deeply conflicted. She had never expected that someone like him, someone so poised and powerful, would feel so vulnerable, so desperate to be seen. It challenged everything she thought she knew about him. That night, Amina met Tund again, this time not under the cover of darkness but in the open, near the edge of the village where the moonlight bathed the earth in soft silver. Tund's eyes were filled with quiet regret. I never wanted to hurt you, Amina, Tund said, his voice almost a whisper. I didn't think I could ever be more than what people saw me as, the rich suitor who always had everything. But I was wrong. Amina stood still, her emotions in turmoil. You've always had everything, Tund. So why do you want me to see you differently? Why should I believe that what you've shown me is real? Tund reached out, his hand trembling. Because I've felt it too, Amina. The pull between us. It's real. I just didn't know how to show you. Amina's heart ached. She could feel the sincerity in his words, but her mind was clouded by the expectations her father had set for her, the reality of her world pressing against her desires. I can't make promises, Tund, she whispered. Not yet. I don't know what I want anymore. The next morning, Amina was once again summoned by her father. Chief Owusu's expression was grim. He had heard rumors about her late-night meetings with Tund, and his patience was running thin. Amina, I don't know what's going on with you, but this nonsense has to stop. Kwame is a good man. He's the right choice for you, he said, his voice a mix of frustration and authority. You've had your moments of independence, but now it's time for you to do what's right for the family. Amina felt the weight of her father's words like an iron chain tightening around her chest. She had always respected him, but his words now felt like a command she could not escape. I'm not a child anymore, father, Amina said, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. I understand what's at stake, but I also have to live my own life. My heart isn't in this marriage to Kwame. Her father's eyes darkened. You have no idea what's at stake, Amina. This isn't just about you and your feelings. This is about the future of our people. Amina turned away, feeling her heart splinter. She wasn't sure if it was the weight of her father's expectations or her growing feelings for Tund, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't keep living for everyone else. The days that followed were filled with tension. Amina's father increased his efforts to arrange the marriage with Kwame. while Amina withdrew more and more into herself. She avoided Kwame and the other suitors, trying to make sense of her feelings. Tund continued to visit in secret, his presence a constant reminder of what Amina longed for, a love that was raw, honest, and real. But every time they met, her heart grew heavier. What did she owe to her father? What did she owe to her people? And what did she owe herself? These questions consumed her thoughts, and yet there was no clear answer. The final night of the festival approached, and Amina felt the pressure mounting. It would be the night when she would have to make her decision. The village was preparing for a grand celebration, and her father's expectations were high. The entire village would be watching. It was impossible to escape the looming shadow of the choice she had to make. As the festival began, Amina stood by the fire, watching the dancers twirl in the bright light of the flames. Her mind was elsewhere, though, on Tund. Would he be there? Would he be able to show her, once again, what true love felt like? She found herself walking to the center of the celebration, and there he was, just as before, waiting for her. The masked man, the real Tund, was standing across from her. He reached out to her, and without a word she took his hand. They moved to the center of the dance floor, the music pulling them together. The firelight reflected in their eyes, and for a brief moment, the world felt right again. There was no more pressure, no more expectations. Just the two of them, dancing in the flames. The music slowed, and Amina and Tund stood facing each other. The air was thick with anticipation. "Tund," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can choose you. I don't know if I can turn my back on my father, on my people." Tund's eyes softened, and he stepped closer to her. "I know it's difficult, Amina, but if you choose me, it's because you've chosen yourself. You've chosen the love you deserve. You deserve a life full of passion, not obligation." Amina closed her eyes, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She thought of Kwame, of the life he could offer her, wealth, security, and the approval of her father. But was that enough? Was that all she needed? "I've lived my life for everyone else," Amina whispered. "But I don't want to live that way anymore." The decision was made. Amina stepped back, her heart full of conviction. "I choose you, Tund. I choose the life that feels true to me." The next day, Amina faced the consequences of her choice. Her father was furious. The village was buzzing with gossip. Chief Owusu's anger was palpable, and he made it clear that Amina's decision had consequences that would affect the future of the entire village. "You have shamed us, Amina," her father said, his voice cold. "You've made a choice that will affect us all. Your duty was to the village, to our people. And now, you've chosen a man with wealth but no standing." Tund, standing beside her, looked calm, but Amina could see the pain in his eyes. He had made the decision to be with her, despite the consequences. She admired his courage, even as she felt the weight of her own. "I've chosen what's right for me, father," Amina replied, her voice steady despite the pain. "And that's all I can do. I am no longer a pawn in a game I don't understand." Her father turned away, too furious to speak. But Amina knew this was just the beginning. Their lives would never be the same. Amina and Tund left the compound together, their futures uncertain but full of possibility. The village would not accept them easily, and Chief Owusu's wrath would be hard to bear. But as they walked away from the place she had known all her life, Amina felt a sense of freedom. For the first time, she was choosing herself, choosing her happiness over everything else. And as Tund took her hand in his, Amina knew one thing for certain. No matter what the future held, she would never regret following her heart. The first few days after Amina's decision were tense. The village felt colder, the air heavier, as if the very soil beneath her feet was rejecting the change. Chief Owusu had locked himself away in his chambers, refusing to speak to anyone about his daughter's disobedience. The elders gathered in secret, and whispers followed Amina wherever she went. Tund had always been strong, but now, standing by Amina's side, he seemed more vulnerable than ever. She could see the weight of her choice settling on his shoulders. "I didn't think it would be like this," Amina admitted one evening as they sat together by the fire. "I thought we'd just leave and things would be easier." Tund shook his head. "It was never going to be easy, but it will be worth it. We have each other now." Despite his comforting words, Amina couldn't help but feel the weight of their decision. She had chosen love, but the world around them had not accepted that choice. Days turned into weeks, and still, the village's response was cold. Chief Owusu had made it clear that Amina was no longer welcome at the family compound. Tund's family, though wealthy, had little influence in the village, and their support wasn't enough to shield them from the disdain of the elders. Amina and Tund began to make a life for themselves, but it was a difficult one. They lived in a small house on the outskirts of the village, the remnants of her wealth now little more than a distant memory. Still, there was something freeing about their new life. They weren't bound by the expectations of the village anymore. "We have each other," Tund would say, always the optimist, and Amina would smile, even though she knew the road ahead would be difficult. One morning, as Amina and Tund were returning from the market, they found a group of men gathered outside their small house. Chief Owusu was at the forefront, his face red with fury. "Amina, you've brought shame to this family, to this village," he shouted. "I gave you everything. I built this life for you, and you." Amina stepped forward, her heart racing. "Father, please, I love him. I chose this. I chose him, and I chose my own life." The chief's face contorted with anger, but there was a flicker of something else. Regret, perhaps? "You have made a fool of yourself, Amina. Do you think he will stand by you when the village turns its back on you?" Tund stepped forward, his expression calm but firm. "I will stand by her. I will never turn my back on her, no matter what happens." The chief's eyes hardened. "Then you both will suffer the consequences." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Amina standing in the dust, her heart heavy with both guilt and determination. The days that followed were filled with hardship. Amina and Tund worked harder than they ever had before, doing everything from farming to crafting to ensure they could survive. It wasn't easy, and often they found themselves exhausted, their bodies aching from the long hours. But it wasn't just physical work that weighed on them. There was the emotional toll, too. Amina's father had made it clear that he would do everything in his power to make their lives difficult. The elders, once allies of the chief, now shunned them completely. Yet through it all, Amina and Tund's bond grew stronger. They shared everything, the small joys, the moments of weakness, the frustrations. And with each passing day, Amina found herself growing more resilient, more sure of the decision she had made. One evening, as Amina sat by the fire, trying to find some comfort in the flickering flames, a figure approached. It was Kwame, the suitor her father had wanted her to marry. Amina stood in shock as he walked up to her. "Kwame," she said, her voice full of surprise. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I came to speak with you. Your father's rage is misdirected. He's furious with you, but I think he's more angry with himself." Amina frowned. "What do you mean?" Kwame sat down next to her. "You see, he made a choice for you. He thought he knew what was best for you. And in doing so, he forgot that you are a person with your own desires, your own will. He tried to control you, but he never truly understood you, not like I do. I'm the only man who truly understands you." How odd, there was that phrase again. Amina's heart tightened. "But why are you telling me this now?" "I'm telling you because I want to help," Kwame said, his tone sincere. "I don't want to be your enemy. I want you to have the life you deserve, even if it's not with me." Amina was taken aback by his words. She had never expected this from Kwame. He had been a part of the world that seemed to hold her back, but now he was offering an olive branch. "I can't change the past," she said softly. "But thank you, Kwame. I didn't expect this from you." He smiled again, a genuine smile this time. "You've always had more strength than anyone gave you credit for, Amina. I respect that." As the weeks went by, Amina began to see the effects of her decision more clearly. Life was still difficult, but she was beginning to find a new sense of purpose. She no longer felt the weight of her father's expectations crushing her. Instead, she focused on building a life with Tund, one that was based on love and mutual respect. One day, while they were working together in the fields, Tund looked at Amina with a quiet intensity. "Do you ever regret your decision?" Amina paused for a moment, reflecting. "No," she said softly. "I don't. There are days when I miss the comforts of the old life, but I've never regretted choosing you. I've never regretted choosing myself." Tund smiled, his eyes filled with admiration. "You are strong, Amina. I'm proud of you." The words warmed her heart. It wasn't an easy life, but it was theirs. They were creating something beautiful, even if it didn't look like the life she had once imagined. Months passed, and just when Amina and Tund began to think they might have a chance at happiness, the unexpected happened. Chief Owusu returned to their home, his expression unreadable. He stood there for a moment, surveying the modest life they had built. "I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would turn her back on her family," he said, his voice quiet but full of authority. Amina met his gaze, her heart pounding. "I haven't turned my back on you, father. I've simply chosen to live my life my own way. I don't regret my choice." The chief's eyes softened just slightly. "Perhaps I've been too hard on you, Amina. I've spent so much time trying to control everything. I never stopped to consider what you truly needed, what you wanted. Amina's heart skipped a beat. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe it's time for me to understand your choices, even if I don't agree with them, Chief Owusu said. I'm not saying I'll approve, but I will listen. Amina stood there, stunned. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing she had ever gotten from her father. It was a crack in the wall that had divided them for so long. As the days went on, Amina's relationship with her father began to shift. Slowly but surely, Chief Owusu started to understand that his daughter's happiness was not something he could control. He was still cautious about Tund, but he respected his daughter's decision. The village, too, began to soften. The elders still disapproved, but there were whispers of change. Some began to see the strength Amina had shown in following her heart, and though they didn't understand, they couldn't deny her courage. And as Amina and Tund built their life together, brick by brick, they knew one thing for sure. They were stronger than they had ever been before, and their love, though tested, was unbreakable. The more days passed, and though Amina and Tund's life remained difficult, there was a sense of calm that had started to settle between them. The villagers who had once whispered behind their backs began to watch from a distance, some in curiosity, others in silence. No one dared confront them openly, but there was a shift in the air, a quiet acknowledgement that Amina and Tund's love had not broken, despite the odds stacked against them. One morning, as Amina worked in the garden, she saw Kwame walking toward her. He was carrying a bundle of produce, an offering of sorts. "Kwame," Amina said, surprised by his visit. "What brings you here today?" He smiled faintly. "I heard that the crops are doing well for you and Tund. I wanted to offer my help, a gesture of goodwill." Amina raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? After everything that's happened?" Kwame nodded, his gaze steady. "I want you to know that I have no hard feelings, Amina. You've made your choice, and I respect it. There's nothing more I can say or do, but I wanted to extend a hand in peace." Amina felt a mix of emotions. It was strange to see him like this, genuine, without the expectations of marriage or family pressure. She hadn't expected such maturity from him. "Thank you, Kwame. That means more than you know." Over the next few weeks, Kwame continued to visit, bringing supplies or helping with the crops. Tund had initially been wary of his presence, but slowly, he began to understand that Kwame wasn't trying to win Amina back. He was genuinely trying to make amends. One evening, while they were all gathered around the fire, Tund spoke up. "I didn't expect this from you, Kwame, but I'm grateful. You don't have to help us, but your kindness is appreciated." Kwame looked at him, and then at Amina. "I want you both to be happy. The village will never change overnight, but maybe it will start with small steps, starting with me." Amina's heart swelled with gratitude. She never would have imagined that Kwame, of all people, would be the one to help bridge the gap between the past and the future. The tension that had once existed between them now seemed like a distant memory. One afternoon, after several weeks of silence, Chief Owusu summoned Amina to his chambers. His expression was somber, and Amina could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "Amina," he began, his voice quiet, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about the choices you've made and the path you've chosen. I can see now that you're not the little girl I once knew. You've grown, you've become someone different, someone stronger." Amina swallowed, her heart racing. "Father, I still don't understand it fully," the chief continued, "but I respect your decision. I can see that you and Tund are not a passing fancy. You have built something real, something that I didn't believe was possible. I've been too stubborn, too caught up in my own pride." Amina's eyes softened. She had never imagined hearing these words from her father. "I still believe in tradition," Chief Owusu said, his voice filled with the weight of his position. "But maybe there is room for change. If you can find happiness this way, then I can no longer stand in your way." Tears welled up in Amina's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "Thank you, Father. That means more to me than I can say." The chief nodded, his gaze steady. "I will not forget this. You have taught me something about the strength of love, something I had long ago forgotten. I hope one day the village will see that too." As Amina and Tund continued to live their lives, a quiet shift began to take place within the village. Some elders began to soften their stance, while others remained firm in their opposition. The pressure from the outside world was still there, but Amina and Tund's love had proven resilient. Their bond had become a symbol, something to either rally behind or resist, depending on who you asked. But even with this newfound support, the village was still divided. There were quiet conversations in the market, subtle glances, and the occasional well-meaning word from an old friend. Amina and Tund had made a mark on the community, and for better or worse, that would stay with them. Kwame had become somewhat of an ally in this quiet revolution. He was still close with the elders, and his shift in attitude helped bring some balance to the tension. One day, while Amina and Kwame were walking to the river to fetch water, she spoke softly. "You've changed, Kwame. I never thought I'd see this side of you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it took losing something I thought I wanted to realize that I was never truly happy. Seeing you and Tund has made me understand that there's more to life than status or approval. Love, that's what matters most." Amina nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never expected to form an unlikely bond with Kwame, but it was one that had brought a sense of peace she had never anticipated. Amina and Tund had begun to rebuild their lives in a way that felt authentic to them. They had worked through the worst of their struggles, but there was still much to be done. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Amina felt a sense of peace she had not known before. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars, Tund took Amina's hand in his. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "No matter where life takes us, I will always choose you. We will build something beautiful together." Amina smiled, her heart full. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her. There was still much to be done, but they had made it this far, and they would continue to fight for each other and for the future they wanted to create. "We will," she whispered, her voice steady. "Together." A couple more weeks passed, and the village began to change too. Slowly but surely, the walls between the past and the future started to crumble. Amina and Tund had become symbols of resilience and love, and while not everyone was fully on board, the quiet revolution they had sparked had begun to grow. The elders who had once opposed them started to see the value of the love that had thrived against all odds. Chief Owusu, though still set in his ways, had become a more tolerant figure, and the village was slowly coming around. It would not happen overnight, but the seeds of change had been planted. And as Amina stood in the village square watching the people around her people, she knew that the future was still uncertain, but it was hers to shape. She had fought for her happiness, and she would continue to do so, with Tund by her side. The story of Amina and Tund had become more than just a love story. It had become a story of resilience, of choosing your own path even when the world is against you. It had become a story of family, love, and the quiet power of choosing yourself. And as Amina looked into Tund's eyes, she smiled, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. It was during the next Great Harvest Festival, the village's most anticipated event, that Amina's life took a turn she hadn't expected. The entire village gathered at the communal grounds, where the rhythmic beats of the drums echoed through the night air. The air was thick with excitement, the warmth of the bonfires mingling with the cool breeze of the night. Amina had been preparing for the festival for weeks, her heart heavy with the expectation that she would attend with Tund. But she felt the pull of something different. That night, when she donned her traditional garb, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. As the music swelled and the crowd swayed, Amina saw him, again. The masked stranger. The man who had danced with her so long ago. The man whose words she could still hear echoing in her heart. He moved through the crowd with such fluidity, as if he were one with the night. There was a connection between them, a silent understanding that both thrilled and terrified Amina. His eyes, hidden behind the mask, locked with hers across the dancing circle. Before she knew it, she was moving toward him, drawn like a magnet. No words were spoken. His presence was an enigma, a mystery that only deepened with each step. Without hesitation, he took her hand, leading her to the center of the dance floor. The crowd parted as they danced together, the music setting the rhythm of their movements. For that moment, there was no village, no past, no obligations. There was only the strange energy between them, an invisible thread that tethered them together. The night felt like it was suspended in time, and Amina allowed herself to be consumed by the moment. The stranger whispered into her ear as they danced, words only she could understand, words that made her heart race and her skin tingle. "You are not meant to be confined by what others want. You are meant to be free." Amina closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling deep into her soul. She didn't know why, but she felt it. This man, this mysterious stranger, held a part of her heart that no one else could touch. One afternoon, after several weeks of silence, Chief Owusu summoned Amina to his chambers. His expression was somber, and Amina could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "Amina," he he began, his voice quiet. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about the choices you've made and the path you've chosen. I can see now that you're not the little girl I once knew. You've grown, you've become someone different, someone stronger. Amina swallowed, her heart racing. Father, I still don't understand it fully, the chief continued. But I respect your decision. I can see that you and Tund are not a passing fancy. You have built something real, something that I didn't believe was possible. I've been too stubborn, too caught up in my own pride. Amina's eyes softened. She had never imagined hearing these words from her father. I still believe in tradition, Chief Owusu said, his voice filled with the weight of his position. But maybe there is room for change. If you can find happiness this way, then I can no longer stand in your way. Tears welled up in Amina's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Thank you, father. That means more to me than I can say. The chief nodded, his gaze steady. I will not forget this. You have taught me something about the strength of love, something I had long ago forgotten. I hope one day the village will see that too. As Amina and Tund continued to live their lives, a quiet shift began to take place within the village. Some elders began to soften their stance, while others remained firm in their opposition. The pressure from the outside world was still there, but Amina and Tund's love had proven resilient. Their bond had become a symbol, something to either rally behind or resist, depending on who you asked. But even with this newfound support, the village was still divided. There were quiet conversations in the market, subtle glances, and the occasional well-meaning word from an old friend. Amina and Tund had made a mark on the community, and for better or worse, that would stay with them. Kwame had become somewhat of an ally in this quiet revolution. He was still close with the elders, and his shift in attitude helped bring some balance to the tension. One day, while Amina and Kwame were walking to the river to fetch water, she spoke softly. You've changed, Kwame. I never thought I'd see this side of you. He smiled faintly. Maybe it took losing something I thought I wanted to realize that I was never truly happy. Seeing you and Tund has made me understand that there's more to life than status or approval. Love, that's what matters most. Amina nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never expected to form an unlikely bond with Kwame, but it was one that had brought a sense of peace she had never anticipated. Amina and Tund had begun to rebuild their lives in a way that felt authentic to them. They had worked through the worst of their struggles, but there was still much to be done. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Amina felt a sense of peace she had not known before. One evening, as they sat beneath the stars, Tund took Amina's hand in his. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he said, his voice filled with emotion. No matter where life takes us, I will always choose you. We will build something beautiful together. Amina smiled, her heart full. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her. There was still much to be done, but they had made it this far, and they would continue to fight for each other and for the future they wanted to create. We will, she whispered, her voice steady. Together. A couple more weeks passed, and the village began to change too. Slowly but surely, the walls between the past and the future started to crumble. Amina and Tund had become symbols of resilience and love, and while not everyone was fully on board, the quiet revolution they had sparked had begun to grow. The elders who had once opposed them started to see the value of the love that had thrived against all odds. Chief Owusu, though still set in his ways, had become a more tolerant figure, and the village was slowly coming around. It would not happen overnight, but the seeds of change had been planted. And as Amina stood in the village square watching the people around her, her people, she knew that the future was still uncertain, but it was hers to shape. She had fought for her happiness, and she would continue to do so, with Tund by her side. The story of Amina and Tund had become more than just a love story. It had become a story of resilience, of choosing your own path even when the world is against you. It had become a story of family, love, and the quiet power of choosing yourself. And as Amina looked into Tund's eyes, she smiled, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. It was during the next Great Harvest Festival, the village's most anticipated event, that Amina's life took a turn she hadn't expected. The entire village gathered at the communal grounds, where the rhythmic beats of the drums echoed through the night air. The air was thick with excitement, the warmth of the bonfires mingling with the cool breeze of the night. Amina had been preparing for the festival for weeks, her heart heavy with the expectation that she would attend with Tund. But she felt the pull of something different. That night, when she donned her traditional garb, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. As the music swelled and the crowd swayed, Amina saw him, again. The masked stranger. The man who had danced with her so long ago. The man whose words she could still hear echoing in her heart. He moved through the crowd with such fluidity, as if he were one with the night. There was a connection between them, a silent understanding that both thrilled and terrified Amina. His eyes, hidden behind the mask, locked with hers across the dancing circle. Before she knew it, she was moving toward him, drawn like a magnet. No words were spoken. His presence was an enigma, a mystery that only deepened with each step. Without hesitation, he took her hand, leading her to the center of the dance floor. The crowd parted as they danced together, the music setting the rhythm of their movements. For that moment, there was no village, no past, no obligations. There was only the strange energy between them, an invisible thread that tethered them together. The night felt like it was suspended in time, and Amina allowed herself to be consumed by the moment. The stranger whispered into her ear as they danced, words only she could understand, words that made her heart race and her skin tingle. You are not meant to be confined by what others want. You are meant to be free. Amina closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling deep into her soul. She didn't know why, but she felt it. This man, this mysterious stranger, held a part of her heart that no one else could touch. After hours of dancing, the festival began to wind down. The night was growing late, and the crowd thinned, but Amina still couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to find this stranger again. She was meant to be with this shadow of a man, even if it was Tund. They left the dance and went to a clearing in the woods. There they shared their souls, their minds, and their bodies. Each touch from this now naked, still masked man was almost enough to make her pass out. Was her mind playing tricks on her? Why did she feel she was with someone totally different, not Tund? The following month, without a word, he again led her away from the revelry, away from the firelight and laughter. They walked through the forest, the moonlight filtering through the trees, casting shadows on the ground. The path was familiar, but Amina felt like she was stepping into the unknown. They returned to the same small clearing, the sounds of the still ongoing festival, now only a distant hum. The stranger turned to her, his masked face inches from hers. The chemistry between them was again undeniable, electric. Without thinking, Amina reached up, her fingers brushing against the mask. She felt his breath catch, but he didn't stop her. The mask came off, revealing his face, one she recognized all too well. It was Tund. Her heart stopped. Amina stood frozen, staring at Tund, her mind racing. The stranger, the man who had danced with her, the man who had spoken to her in a way no one ever had, the man she had given herself to a month ago, was Tund? Her Tund? But it didn't make sense. How could this be? Tund, she whispered, her voice shaking. Why? Why did you hide from me? Tund lowered his head, his expression filled with a deep sadness. I wanted to be the man who could give you what you needed, not the one your father expected you to marry. I wanted you to see me for who I truly am, without the mask of wealth or expectation. Amina's chest tightened. But why the mask? Why the lies? I wasn't lying, Amina. I was hiding because I didn't want you to think of me as just the son of a wealthy man, someone you were expected to marry. I wanted you to see me as I am, as the man who loves you. Amina's head spun. Her emotions were a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. Tund, the man she had chosen, had been hiding his true self from her all along. And yet, despite the betrayal, there was something else, something she couldn't ignore. I don't know what to think, Amina said, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know if I can trust you. You did this last month and thought it would be funny to do it again? Tund stepped closer, his voice full of regret. No, this is the first time since last year. I never meant to hurt you. But the truth is, I wanted to love you the way you deserved. And now I have to face the consequences of hiding from you. Before Amina could respond, a sharp wave of nausea hit her, causing her to stumble. Tund caught her immediately, concern flashing across his face. Amina, are you all right? I don't feel well, she whispered, clutching her stomach. Tund's eyes widened with sudden realization. Amina, what's wrong? Tell me what's happening. Amina's heart raced. She could feel it, deep within her. Something had shifted. The weight in her belly wasn't just a sickness. It was something else. She was pregnant. The realization hit her like a thunderclap, the shock of it making her dizzy. The following days were a blur. Amina and Tund couldn't find the right words to speak to each other. The revelation of their child, of the life they had created together in secret, complicated everything. But even through the confusion, there was a sense of clarity that had never been there before. Amina felt conflicted. She loved Tund, but the path before them was not simple. The village would not accept their union, not now. Chief Owusu would never forgive her for this. And Tund, he had lied to her, even if it had been to protect her. But there was something undeniable about their connection, something deeper than all the secrets and lies. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of their small home, Tund took Amina's hand, his voice low and sincere. "I never imagined we'd end up here. But this child, Amina, this child is our future. I want to raise them with you, to be the father you and this child deserve." Amina gazed into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. Her heart was heavy with uncertainty, but one thing was certain. Their love had brought them this far. And now it would carry them forward, no matter what challenges awaited. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know what's next. But I want to be with you. I want to raise this child with you." Tund nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Then we will face it together, no matter what." Amina knew that once her father found out, their world would change again. Chief Owusu would never accept that his daughter, his pride, was carrying the child of the man who had been hiding his true identity from her. But despite her fear, Amina knew one thing. She could no longer live in the shadows. She had to tell him. It was with a heavy heart that she approached her father, sitting him down in the family chambers to explain everything. As the words left her lips, Chief Owusu's face grew darker with each passing moment. "You've made your choices, Amina," he said, his voice low and controlled. "And now you will live with the consequences." "I will live with them, father," Amina replied, her voice steady. "But I will not regret them. This is my child, and Tund is the father. I've chosen my path, and I won't turn back now." Her father's eyes softened, but his disappointment was clear. He had always wanted the best for her, but the world he envisioned for her was no longer the one she wanted. The days following Amina's revelation to her father were filled with tension. The village began to whisper again, and although Amina tried to stay focused on her future with Tund, the reality of the situation weighed heavily on her. Her growing belly, the changing expressions on the villagers' faces, and the judgment from her father were becoming harder to ignore. One afternoon, as Amina walked through the market, she bumped into her closest friend, Zainab. Zainab had always been a source of comfort, a safe space where Amina could unload the thoughts that plagued her. The two had grown up together, sharing everything from childhood secrets to dreams of the future. "Why do you look so pale, Amina?" Zainab asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "You've been distant lately. You haven't been yourself." Amina hesitated, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell Zainab everything, but the truth was so complicated, so tangled. Her hands trembled as she held onto her friend's arm, leading her away from the prying eyes of the market crowd. "Zainab, I need to tell you something," Amina said quietly, her voice shaking. "Something no one else can know." Zainab nodded, her expression serious. "What is it, Amina? You know you can trust me." Amina took a deep breath. This was harder than she imagined, but the truth had to come out. "The baby, it's not Tund's." Zainab's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean? How is that possible?" Amina bit her lip, feeling the weight of her words. "The night of the festival, the masked man, he's the father. It's Tund who I love, but it was him, the stranger, who is the father of this child." Zainab stared at her, speechless. It was as if the world had stopped turning. "Amina, this is unbelievable. You and Tund were together, weren't you? How could this happen?" Amina's eyes welled up with tears. "I don't know, Zainab. I thought it was just a dance, a moment. But that night, I let myself be swept away, and now this is the consequence. I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose Tund, but I can't deny what's growing inside of me. The child is his, but also not his." Zainab stepped forward and took Amina's hand, her voice soft but full of concern. "You've made a choice to be with Tund, and you'll have to tell him, Amina. You can't keep this secret, not from him. He deserves to know. This is his child too, in a way." Amina nodded, her stomach twisting with anxiety. "I know, but I'm so scared. I've already lied to him, kept this from him. How can I face him knowing I've betrayed his trust like this?" Zainab squeezed her hand. "You're not the only one who has been hurt, Amina. Tund will understand. He'll be shocked, of course, but love doesn't stop because of one mistake." But Amina wasn't so sure. She didn't know if Tund would ever understand, or if he would see her as nothing more than a liar and a deceiver. As the days wore on, Amina found it harder to face Tund. She couldn't look him in the eye without feeling guilty, the lie between them like a shadow she couldn't shake. Every time she tried to bring up the truth, words failed her. One evening, as the sun set and the village began to quiet, Amina found herself standing outside Tun's home. She had made up her mind. She couldn't live with the secret anymore. She had to tell him, no matter the consequences. When Tund opened the door and saw her standing there, his face softened. "Amina, what's wrong? You've been so distant. Come in." Amina stepped inside, her heart heavy in her chest. She sat down on the mat, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her. Tund joined her, concern etched on his face. "Amina," he said softly, "talk to me. I know something's not right." Amina took a deep breath, her mind racing. "Tund, there's something I need to tell you. It's about the baby." Tund's brow furrowed. "What about the baby?" Amina's hands shook as she looked at him, tears threatening to spill. "The baby is not yours. It's the masked man from the festival. He's the father, Tund, not you." Tund stared at her, the words sinking in slowly. His face shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to something darker. Hurt, anger, and confusion all mixed into one. "What are you saying?" he whispered, his voice tight. "You slept with him? After everything we've been through? After I've stood by you? You let him touch you?" Amina felt the sting of his words, each one a dagger in her heart. "I never meant for it to happen, Tund. It was one night, one mistake. I don't even know how it happened. But I swear to you, I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to hurt you." Tund stood up suddenly, pacing the room in frustration. "How could you do this to me, Amina? I've given everything to you. My trust, my love, my future. And now this? You expect me to just accept this?" "I don't expect you to understand, Tund," Amina said, her voice breaking. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I've ruined everything." Tund's anger faded into sorrow, but his voice was cold. "I don't know what to say. I don't know if I can be with someone who's lied to me like this. How can we build a future together if we can't even be honest with each other?" Amina felt the weight of his words. She had broken something between them, something that might never be repaired. "I understand if you can't forgive me," she whispered. "But I didn't want this. I wanted us. I wanted to build a life with you." Tund turned away, his back to her. "I need time, Amina. I don't know what to think. I don't know what I want anymore." Amina spent the next few days in turmoil. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were consumed by Tund's words, the hurt in his eyes, and the uncertainty of their future. She had hoped that the truth would set her free, but all it had done was tear their relationship apart. But there was another weight on her shoulders. The truth about the baby was still out there, and soon the villagers would start asking questions. Chief Owusu, in particular, would never forgive her. The consequences of her actions were only just beginning to unfold. She decided to seek solace in Zainab, hoping to find some clarity. "I don't know what to do, Zainab," Amina confessed, sitting across from her friend. "Tund is so hurt. I don't know if he can ever forgive me." Zainab nodded sympathetically. "This isn't an easy situation, Amina. But the truth is, you have to face the consequences. And maybe, just maybe, Tund will come to understand. But you can't hide from this forever." Amina sighed deeply, feeling the weight of her choices pressing down on her. "I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if I even deserve to." Zainab took her hand, squeezing it gently. "All you can do is try. And no matter what happens, you have people who love you. You're not alone in this." As Amina stood before her home one morning, feeling the first stirrings of her baby inside her, she knew she couldn't wait any longer. The situation had become too complex, and the truth had already started to spread. Tund had distanced himself, and the villagers were beginning to gossip again. She had to make a decision, a painful one that would change everything. Would she fight for the love she had with Tund, or would she face the consequences of her past actions alone? Days passed since Amina's heart-wrenching conversation with Tund. The distance between them had only grown, and the strain of their complicated relationship weighed heavily on her. But just when she thought things couldn't get any more difficult, the truth came crashing down in a way she never expected. Amina had been lying awake in bed one night, restless, when a visitor arrived at her door. It was Zainab, who looked even more agitated than usual. "Amina, you need to hear this," Zainab said, her voice tense as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room as though she were looking for something, some sort of truth to bring to light. "It's about Tund. You're not going to believe it." Amina's heart skipped a beat. She felt the sting of dread creep over her, expecting the worst. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zainab sat down next to her, grabbing her hand. "I've been talking to some people in the village, and, Amina, you have to listen carefully. There are rumors that Tund is not the original masked man from the festival. Amina's mind spun. What do you mean? He danced with me, he took off his mask. I saw his face. Zainab shook her head. That's exactly it. He wore the mask to deceive you. The man you fell for, the man who spoke to your soul. He wasn't Tund. Tund put the mask on because he wanted you to fall for him. But there was another man, the real masked man. Amina's heart dropped into her stomach. Are you telling me Tund wasn't the masked man? So I am right. Tund is not the father of my baby. How could he do that? He had me thinking I was crazy when I told him the baby wasn't his. Zainab nodded, her face grim. He wanted to make sure you'd fall in love with him without any distractions, without your father's expectations clouding your judgment. He thought if you fell for someone else, it would complicate things. So he disguised himself as the man you thought you wanted. The room spun around Amina as the pieces of her world started to crumble. But who is the real masked man then? She whispered, her voice shaking. Zainab leaned in closer, her eyes wide with intensity. Amina, you have to hear this. The real masked man, the one you truly danced with, is someone you know very well. It's someone in this village, someone very close to you. Amina felt a chill run down her spine as she tried to piece together the puzzle. Who? Who is it? Zainab looked at her with a deep, almost fearful gaze. It's Kwame. Amina froze. Kwame? But he's a friend, a good friend, my father's trusted advisor. He's always been there. It can't be him. Zainab shook her head. I wish I were making this up, Amina. But it's the truth. Kwame was the masked man. And now he's the father of your child. Amina's thoughts were a storm of confusion, disbelief, and shock. Kwame? The man she had always seen as a reliable advisor, a trusted friend, someone who had been there for her and the rest of the royal family for years. He was the masked man, and he was the father of her baby? Her heart raced as she tried to process everything Zainab had just told her. The weight of the secret felt like 1,000 stones pressing down on her chest. How could Kwame have kept something like this from her? And more importantly, why? How could he not have told me? Amina asked, her voice almost pleading. Why keep something like this from me? He slept with me, and never said a word. Why wear a mask? I can't believe he would play with my emotions like that. Zainab's face softened with sympathy. I don't know, Amina. But it sounds like he had his reasons. Maybe he thought you wouldn't accept him. Maybe he feared what your father would think. But one thing is clear now, you definitely need to confront him. Amina stood up, pacing back and forth. I don't know what to do anymore. Tund lied to me. Kwame has been hiding the truth from me. And now I have to face them both? I don't know how to fix this. Zainab stood up and placed a reassuring hand on Amina's shoulder. The truth is out, Amina. You can't keep running from it. You need to find Kwame and hear what he has to say. You deserve to know why he did this. And you deserve the truth. The next morning, Amina found herself walking toward Kwame's house, her heart heavy with the burden of everything she had just learned. She had never imagined that her life would take this turn. As she approached the door, she hesitated, taking a deep breath before knocking. The sound echoed in the quiet village morning. A few moments later, Kwame opened the door, his face lighting up with surprise when he saw her standing there. Amina, what a surprise! Is everything all right? Amina's heart raced, and she couldn't bring herself to speak at first. Her emotions were overwhelming. No, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Everything is not all right. You've been hiding something from me, Kwame. And you have the audacity to come to the door with a smile on your face. I know the truth. Kwame's expression faltered, and he stepped back, silently inviting her inside. Come in, Amina. We need to talk. Once inside, Amina wasted no time. You were the masked man, she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. You've been hiding from me? And now I'm carrying your child. Answer me, Kwame. Kwame's face fell, and he lowered his gaze. I never wanted you to find out like this. But yes, I was the masked man. And yes, the child you carry is mine. Amina took a step back, feeling a mixture of betrayal and confusion. Why didn't you tell me? Why wear the mask? You've been so close to me, so close to my family. Why keep this secret? Kwame's voice was filled with regret as he finally looked at her. I wanted to be the one you loved, Amina. But I knew if I showed you who I really was, you'd never see me as more than the royal advisor to your family, your father's friend. I didn't want to be just another man to you. I wanted to be the one who mattered. Amina's heart hurt as she listened to him, the truth finally settling in. She had always trusted Kwame, but this felt like a betrayal. Yet, as she looked into his eyes, she saw the pain and the love that had been buried under the mask. I didn't know what to do, Amina. I didn't want to complicate things. But I love you. I have always loved you. And now, with this child, I want to be part of your life. Can't you see it's meant to be? Amina felt tears welling up in her eyes. And Tund? What do I tell him? What about my father? What will they think when they find out the truth? Crying, Amina pleaded. How, Kwame? How could you do this to me? Kwame reached out, gently taking her hand. We will figure it out, Amina. But you have to decide what you want. You've been given a choice, and I know it's not an easy one. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Amina stood there, her heart torn in two. Kwame's revelation had shaken her to the core. She had spent so much time trying to figure out what was best for her, trying to navigate her complicated relationship with Tund. But now, the situation was even more complicated. How could she possibly choose between the man she thought she loved and the man who had secretly loved her all along? And what would the future hold for the child growing inside her? Would she raise it alone, or would she find a way to bring these two men, Tund and Kwame, into her life? How could she ever explain all of this to her father? Her mind spun with questions, and for the first time, she realized that she had no clear answers. All she could do now was take the next step, and pray she could find her way through the tangled mess of love, betrayal, and family. After Amina left Kwame's house, she was a mess. Her mind was racing. The weight of the situation felt unbearable. She had learned the truth about the masked man, but that only left her with more questions. She felt betrayed by Tund and confused by Kwame's sudden honesty. Yet something inside her still clung to the possibility that she could find peace, that somehow there could be a way forward with one of them. But as she lay awake that night, Amina couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her world was still unraveling. The pieces were falling into place too slowly, and the more she thought about Kwame's confession, the more she realized something still wasn't right. Call it women's intuition, but something was still off. That night, as she tossed and turned, she received an unexpected visit from Zainab, who had been looking for her all afternoon. Zainab's face was pale, and her hands shook as she sat down beside Amina. Amina, Zainab began, her voice trembling. I've just come from Kwame's house. You need to hear this, too. Amina sat up, her heart skipping a beat. What happened? What's wrong now? I can't take any more. Zainab hesitated before speaking again. It's about Kwame. He's been hiding something else from you. Amina's stomach dropped. What do you mean? What now? What's he hiding? Zainab took a deep breath before revealing the shocking news. Kwame, he's gotten another woman pregnant. He slept with his old girlfriend while he thought you'd chosen Tund. She's come to him with the news today. Amina felt as though the ground beneath her was slipping away. What? Another woman? Old girlfriend? Are you serious? Zainab nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. Yes, and I'm not sure he knows how to tell you. He's been carrying this secret, and now it's like everything he's been trying to build with you is falling apart. Amina was silent for a long time, trying to process the information. But why? Why would he do that? After everything? Zainab shook her head. I don't think he meant for it to happen. When he saw that Tund had tricked you into thinking he was the masked man, Kwame assumed he'd lost you forever. He thought you'd stay with Tund, raise the baby as his. So, out of heartbreak or confusion, he ended up with his prior girlfriend, and now she's pregnant. He didn't expect to come back into your life like this. Amina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. This is all just too much. I thought things were complicated before, but now it feels impossible. Zainab sat next to her, offering silent support. You don't have to make any decisions right now, Amina, but you've got to go talk to Kwame. He's already carrying the guilt of what's happened, and you deserve to know everything. Amina decided that she couldn't avoid Kwame any longer. She needed to hear the truth from him, straight from his mouth. It was the only way to move forward. That is, if there was a way forward at all. Later that afternoon, she found herself standing in front of his house once more. This time, she was determined to ask the questions she needed answers to. Kwame opened the door, his face drained of the usual warmth. When he saw Amina standing there, his shoulders slumped slightly, and he stepped aside, letting her in. Amina, he said softly, his voice heavy with regret. You've come for more answers, haven't you? Amina nodded, her gaze unwavering. Yes, Kwame. I need to know everything. You told me the truth about the baby, but there's more, isn't there? I need you to be honest with me. What else are you hiding? Kwame swallowed hard and sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. Amina, I've been an idiot. I've been so stupid. I thought I lost you when I saw you with Tund. When he tricked you, I assumed you'd choose him. I thought you would raise the child with him, and that was it for me. I wasn't thinking clearly. I ended up sleeping with someone I shouldn't have. She came to me today, telling me that she's pregnant. Amina felt her stomach twist into knots. Who is she? Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Kwame looked up at her, his eyes filled with remorse. Her name is Aisha. We were once close, but I lost touch with her when I started working more closely with your family. I didn't think anything would come of it, but when I saw you with Tund, I thought everything was over. And now, I'm going to be a father to another child I never expected. Amina struggled to find her voice, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. So, you thought you lost me, and in your desperation, you slept with someone else and got them pregnant? Just like that. Kwame's face hardened, his guilt turning into shame. I know it sounds horrible, Amina, and I know it doesn't make any sense, but I was lost. And now, I'm even more lost. Amina's breath hitched as the weight of his words settled in her chest. And what about me, Kwame? What about this great future you keep talking about? Always talking about how you will always be there for me. What about the child I'm carrying? Or am I just another consequence for you to deal with? Kwame stood up, his voice rising with frustration. I don't want to hurt you, Amina. I never wanted any of this. I thought I had no chance with you anymore, and now I've messed everything up even more. Amina took a step back, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know what to think anymore, Kwame. You've been a part of my life for so long, but now, I don't know if I can trust you. How can I be with someone who couldn't even think of me when I needed him most? Kwame closed the distance between them, his eyes pleading. Amina, please, don't walk away from me. I never meant for things to end like this. I've made a terrible mistake, and now I'm paying for it. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I want a future with you and our child. Please don't give up on me. Amina shook her head, her heart heavy with indecision. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Kwame. I don't know if I can raise a child with someone who's made so many mistakes. I need time to think. Go talk to Aisha and let her know how you are going to be there for her and her baby. Kwame's face crumpled with sorrow, but he didn't push her away. He simply nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. Take all the time you need, Amina. I won't force you to make any decisions. But I love you, and I will fight for you. And for our child. Days passed, and Amina found herself torn between two men. Tund, who had betrayed her trust, and Kwame, who had made a choice that left her heart in pieces. She couldn't deny that she still cared for Kwame, but the truth of his actions, his infidelity, his lack of honesty, left her uncertain about the future they could have together. How could she choose someone who had made such a mistake, someone who had failed to be there when she needed him most? Tund, on the other hand, had lied to her in a different way. His deception had caused her to fall for a version of him that wasn't real. But was it fair to blame him entirely for the pain she was feeling? Was his love for her enough to overcome the lies he told? The choice before her was impossible. But Amina knew one thing for sure. She couldn't let the child inside her grow up in a world of uncertainty, not with a father who was still grappling with his own mistakes. The days stretched into weeks, and Amina couldn't escape the constant turmoil inside her. Her heart was heavy with doubt, her thoughts consumed by the two men in her life, Tund and Kwame. Each day brought a new wave of confusion, and every night, the same questions kept her awake. What is the right choice? Who is the man I can trust to build a future with? As her pregnancy progressed, Amina felt the weight of the child inside her growing, just as her feelings for the two men seemed to grow more complicated. She was starting to show now, and her body was changing in ways that only reminded her of the huge decision she faced. She couldn't let this child grow up in a world of confusion, in a house divided between two fathers who weren't sure where they stood. Amina had distanced herself from both Tund and Kwame, taking time to focus on herself, on the future of her child. She had been spending more time with Zainab, seeking her friend's wisdom in the midst of her turmoil. One afternoon, as they sat by the river, Zainab spoke up. Amina, you've been carrying this burden alone for too long. It's time you make a decision. You have a life to live and a child to raise. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to make a choice. Amina sighed, looking out over the water. I don't know how to choose, Zainab. Kwame is the father of my child, but he hurt me with his lies and mistakes. Tund, he tricked me, he lied to me, and I don't know if I can ever trust him again. Zainab placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. But Amina, trust is built over time, and it's something that has to be earned. Do you think either of them can earn your trust again? What does your heart tell you? Amina closed her eyes, feeling a deep ache inside her chest. I don't know what my heart says anymore. It feels like it's been shattered into so many pieces that I don't know if it can ever be whole again. I don't even know if I can forgive either of them." Zainab nodded thoughtfully. "It's hard, I know. But sometimes forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about letting go of the pain so that you can heal, and so that you can move forward. And also forgiving yourself so you can let go of that pain." Amina sat in silence, pondering her friend's words. What if she couldn't let go of the pain? What if she couldn't forgive them? Or herself? A week after her conversation with Zainab, Amina received an unexpected visit from Kwame. He arrived at her door just as the sun began to set, his face weary, as if he hadn't slept in days. He had come to speak to her one last time. "Amina," he began, his voice low and filled with emotion. "I know I've made a terrible mess of things. I've hurt you, and I've hurt myself in the process. But I need to tell you something that's been weighing on my heart." Amina stood there, her arms crossed, unsure of what to expect. "I've heard enough, Kwame. I know about Aisha. I know about the baby." Kwame's eyes softened with regret. "I never meant for that to happen. When I saw that Tund had tricked you, I thought you were gone. I thought you'd chosen him. I made a foolish decision, and now I have to live with it." Amina's voice was barely above a whisper as she spoke. "I don't know if I can forgive you for what you did. You lied to me, Kwame. You hurt me. You hurt me bad." Kwame took a step forward, his face pleading. "I know, Amina. I know. And I'm so sorry. But I love you, and I want to make things right. I want to be a father to our child. I want to build a future with you, even if it means starting from nothing." Amina's heart wavered, her emotions caught between the man who had deceived her and the man who had always been there. She wanted to believe in him, to believe that he could change, but the fear of more heartache held her back. "I don't know, Kwame," she said softly, shaking her head. "I don't know if I can. My heart is broken, and I don't know how to put it back together." Kwame's eyes filled with tears, and he reached out, taking her hands in his. "Please, Amina, I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I can be the man you deserve. Please don't let this mistake define me. Let me prove to you that I can be the father our child needs and the man you desire." Amina felt the pull of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, but still, she couldn't shake the doubt in her heart. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "I can't right now, Kwame. I need time." Kwame nodded, his face filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Amina. I'll be here, waiting for you." Just as Amina was beginning to process her emotions, Tund returned to the village. He had been away, giving the space both he and she needed, but now he was back, hoping for another chance. When he saw Amina, he walked towards her, his face filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Amina," he said softly, his voice laced with regret, "I owe you an apology. I should have been honest with you from the start. I lied to you and I hurt you. And for that, I'm deeply sorry." Amina met his gaze, feeling the old spark of love she had once felt for him. But now it was overshadowed by the truth of his deception. "Tund, you tricked me. You made me believe that you were the masked man. You used my feelings against me." Tund lowered his head, his shame evident. "I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't stand to see you with someone else. And I hate that you were. I wanted you to love me. I was wrong, Amina. But I love you and I want to be with you. I'll do anything to make it right." Amina's heart ached as she listened to him. The love she once had for him was still there, but it was tainted by the lies, by his betrayal, by hers. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Tund," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You've hurt me too much. So much has happened." Tund stepped closer, his voice desperate. "Please, Amina. I made a mistake, but I would never hurt you again. I swear it. You and the child mean everything to me." Amina felt torn, the love she once felt for Tund pulling at her heart. But deep down, she knew that trust could only be rebuilt if both of them were willing to fight for it. And the question was, did she have the strength to forgive him? Because it sounded like he had already forgiven her. That night, Amina sat alone under the stars, her mind racing with everything she had learned. She thought about Tund's return and Kwame's plea for forgiveness. She thought about the child growing inside her and the future she had to build. She had come to a crossroads, and the decision was hers to make. Could she trust either of them? Could she forgive them for the pain they had caused her? She knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. She had to make a choice, not just for herself, but for the child she carried, and for the future she wanted to build. Amina woke up early the next morning, the sun barely rising over the horizon. She felt an emptiness inside her, a weight she couldn't shake. The previous night's thoughts had clouded her mind even more, and she knew that the time had come to face the truth. The truth of who she was, who she loved, and what kind of future she wanted for herself and her child. It wasn't just about Tund or Kwame anymore. It was about her own happiness, her own peace, and whether she could ever find healing after all the lies and betrayals. She dressed quickly, her movements slow and deliberate. She felt the child within her, growing with each passing day, a constant reminder of the responsibility she now carried. She had to choose who she wanted by her side as they both entered this new chapter of their lives. Amina walked to the village clearing, the place where she and Zainab often spoke about the future. She needed to clear her head, to think, but she knew that she couldn't do it alone. Zainab had been there through every heartbreak, every confusion, and now she would help her through the hardest choice yet. Amina found Zainab sitting near the old oak tree, the one where they had sat many times before. Her friend looked up, her expression filled with concern as she saw the sadness in Amina's eyes. "You've been up all night, haven't you?" Zainab asked gently, standing to embrace Amina. She hugged her tightly. "Come, sit with me." Amina sat down beside her, leaning her head on her friend's shoulder. "I don't know what to do anymore, Zainab. I'm torn between them, and no matter how hard I try, I can't see a clear path. Kwame wants me to forgive him. Tund is begging for another chance. And here I am, confused and lost." Zainab remained quiet for a moment, then said, "Amina, you are not alone in this. And I know this decision feels impossible, but you have to ask yourself one thing. Who do you want by your side as you raise this child? Who can you trust, and who can you see a future with?" Amina sighed. "I want to believe in both of them, Zainab, but I don't know if I can. They've both hurt me in different ways. Tund lied to me, used me. And Kwame, he slept with another woman when he thought I had chosen Tund. How can I choose between them when they've both let me down?" Zainab turned to face her, her eyes soft but unwavering. "It's not about choosing between them, Amina. It's about choosing what's best for you. Do you want to keep living in a world of doubt, or do you want peace? Can you find peace with either of them? Can you forgive them for their mistakes, not for them, but for your own sake?" Amina looked up at the sky, the clouds drifting slowly above. "I don't know if I can forgive them, but I also don't know if I can live without them." Zainab took her hand. "The only way to find out is to decide. And remember, you don't have to have all the answers now. The future is not set in stone. But the love you deserve should be one that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel whole." Amina nodded slowly, feeling the weight of Zainab's words sink in. She had been looking for love, but she had been overlooking something crucial: her own peace. She had to forgive herself. Later that day, after much contemplation, Amina called both Kwame and Tund to meet her at the village square. The decision was finally upon her, and she had to be strong enough to make it, even if it meant breaking hearts in the process. When both men arrived, their expressions were filled with anticipation. Tund's face was hopeful, his eyes locked on Amina as if she was his only chance for redemption. Kwame, on the other hand, looked tense, his hands clenched at his sides, as if bracing himself for whatever Amina was about to say. Amina took a deep breath, standing before them both. "I've thought long and hard about this. I've struggled with my feelings for both of you, and I've realized that I can't keep living in this uncertainty. I need to make a choice, not just for me, but for my child. I can't keep going back and forth." Tund took a step forward. "Amina, please. I know I've wronged you. I know I hurt you, but I'm asking for another chance. I love you, and I'll spend my life proving it." Amina looked at him, her heart aching with the memories of the love they once shared. "I know you love me, Tund, but I can't keep living with the lies. I can't keep doubting everything. I need trust, and right now, I don't think I can find it with you." Tund's face fell, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand, Amina. I've lost you, but I'll never stop loving you." Amina's gaze shifted to Kwame, who was watching her with wide, fearful eyes. "Kwame," she began, her voice soft but resolute, "I know you want to be with me. I know you want to be a father to this child, but I need to tell you something. I've thought about it, and I can't ignore the fact that we've both made mistakes." Kwame stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Amina, please. I'm not asking for forgiveness for everything I've done, but I want to be the man you need. I want to be there for you and our child." Amina felt the weight of her decision pushing down on her chest, but she knew what she had to say. "I can't be with you either, Kwame. Not after everything. I'm sorry, but I need to walk away." Kwame's face paled, and for a moment he was speechless. He swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. "I understand, Amina. I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused you." Amina nodded, her heart breaking for both men. I wish things could have been different, but they're not. I have to move forward with my life, with my child. I hope you both find the peace you're looking for." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving both men standing in the square, their faces filled with a mixture of heartbreak and regret. Amina walked away, the weight of her decision heavy on her shoulders. She felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness. She had let go of something that once seemed so right, and yet she knew it was the only choice she could make. Right now, she was free. The road ahead was uncertain, but Amina felt something stirring inside her, a sense of peace. She was no longer bound by the expectations of others, no longer shackled by the men who had once tried to define her future. She was choosing herself, her peace, and her child. As she returned to her home that evening, she looked out at the horizon, knowing that the future was hers to shape. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it, knowing that she was no longer living in the shadows of the past. Her heart might have been broken, but it was also healing. Amina spent the following weeks preparing for the birth of her child, her mind clearer than it had been in months. She worked with Zainab to prepare the nursery, and she started to envision the kind of mother she wanted to be. She wasn't alone. She had friends who loved her, a community that supported her, and most importantly, she had herself. One evening, as she rested by the fire, she felt a gentle kick from her baby, a reminder of the life she was about to bring into the world. She smiled, a small but genuine smile, as she placed a hand on her belly. "I'll make sure you grow up in a world full of love," she whispered to her child. "No matter what the past holds, the future will be better." And for the first time in a long while, Amina felt a glimmer of hope. Amina's pregnancy continued to progress, and with each passing day, her body changed in ways she had never anticipated. She was growing stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. As the days grew closer to the birth, she found herself reflecting on the life she was about to bring into the world, one that would be full of love and strength, something she had been deprived of for far too long. Despite the turbulence of the past months, Amina had found a new sense of purpose. She no longer felt the weight of choosing between Tund and Kwame. Instead, she focused on preparing for the day she would hold her child in her arms, knowing that she had made the right decision for herself. Zainab had been a constant support, helping Amina with preparations, offering advice on childbirth, and reminding her that she was not alone. Zainab's presence had become a steady anchor in the storm of Amina's emotions. One afternoon, as Amina sat by the river with Zainab, she spoke of the future. "I know this is the right path for me, Zainab. I can't keep looking back at the past. I have to move forward, but I can't help but wonder if I've made the right choice for my child. Will I be enough?" Zainab smiled warmly, squeezing Amina's hand. "Amina, you've been through so much and you've come out stronger. You'll be the mother your child needs, and you'll never be alone. You have a village behind you." Amina's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Zainab. You've always been there for me, and I don't think I could have done this without you." Zainab nodded. "You don't have to thank me, Amina. We are family, and family looks after each other." It wasn't long before Amina began to receive unexpected visitors, both Tund and Kwame. They each came separately, both seemingly hoping to speak with her and somehow find redemption. Their timing was as awkward as ever, and Amina had to prepare herself for whatever they wanted to say. Kwame came first, his eyes tired but determined. He had been keeping his distance, respecting Amina's wishes, but he couldn't stay away any longer. He arrived one evening as Amina was sitting by the fire, feeling a wave of anxiety pass over her. "Amina," Kwame said softly, standing just outside the doorway. "Can we talk?" Amina hesitated but then nodded, inviting him to sit down. "What is it, Kwame?" Kwame looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've made many mistakes, and I know I can't change what's been done, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I'm here for the child no matter what." Amina was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. She had heard them before, those same promises of love and redemption, but now it felt different. Perhaps it was because she no longer needed his validation to feel whole. She had learned to rely on herself, her strength. "I appreciate that, Kwame," Amina said, her voice steady but soft. "But I can't offer you anything more. I've made my peace, and I've chosen to move forward without looking back. I'm building a future for my child, and I need to focus on that." Kwame looked disappointed, but he nodded. "I understand, Amina, and I'm sorry for everything. If you ever need anything, anything at all, I'm here." With those final words, Kwame left, and Amina was left with a bittersweet feeling. She had been strong enough to make her choice, but it still wasn't easy to let go of the relationship that had once meant so much to her. A few days after Kwame's visit, Amina received another surprise. Tund arrived at her doorstep, his expression both hopeful and anxious. Amina had been preparing herself for this moment when Tund would come to plead for forgiveness. She had already made her decision, but she couldn't help but wonder if he would make her second-guess it. "Amina," Tund said, his voice filled with urgency. "I've made so many mistakes. I know I've lost your trust. But I love you, and I'll spend every day of my life making it right. Please, let me prove myself." Amina stood up, her body suddenly feeling tense. "Tund, I've heard these words from you before, and I believed them once. But I can't keep holding on to promises that aren't real. You hurt me, and I can't forget that." Tund's face faltered, and he took a step closer. "I can't lose you, Amina. I'll do anything. I'll be the man you need. Let me show you that I've changed." Amina felt the pull of his words, the old affection she had for him stirring deep inside. But she pushed those feelings aside. She had learned to put herself first, to trust her own instincts above the pleas of others. "You've hurt me too much, Tund, and I can't be in a relationship where I don't feel safe, where I can't trust the person I'm with. I need to protect myself and my child. I hope you understand." Tund looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. "I understand," he said softly, his voice breaking. "But I'll always love you, Amina." As he walked away, Amina felt a strange sense of finality. She had made her decision, and now she could finally begin to heal, knowing that she had done what was best for her and her child. As the days passed, Amina's pregnancy continued, and the village rallied around her. Zainab, along with other women from the village, helped Amina prepare for the birth of her child. The support from the community was overwhelming, and Amina couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude that had been missing in her life for quite some time. She spent her days sewing baby clothes, preparing the nursery, and thinking about what kind of mother she wanted to be. She would raise this child with love, with strength, and with the knowledge that family wasn't always defined by blood. It was about the connections we build and the people who stand by us. One afternoon, as Amina rested in the garden, Zainab sat beside her. "Amina, you're going to be an amazing mother. Your strength, your courage, it's something this child will carry with them for the rest of their life." Amina smiled, her hand resting on her belly. "I hope so, Zainab. I hope I can be everything this child needs." "You will be," Zainab said, her voice full of warmth. "You already are." The day of Amina's labor came sooner than expected. She had been in labor for several hours, and the pain was almost unbearable. But through it all, she felt a sense of peace. She was no longer fighting the past, but embracing the future. Surrounded by Zainab and other women from the village, Amina gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment the child was placed in her arms, a surge of love washed over her. This was the beginning of something new, something beautiful, a fresh start for both her and her child. Tears filled Amina's eyes as she gazed down at her son. "Welcome to the world, Kofi," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're going to have a life full of love." As the village celebrated the arrival of the new life, Amina knew that she had made the right choice. She was no longer lost in the shadows of her past. She was finally stepping into the future, ready to embrace motherhood with all the strength and love she had within her. Amina had barely settled into her new routine of motherhood when she received a visitor. It was early one morning when she was tending to her son, Kofi, who had just woken up, that she heard the soft thudding of footsteps outside her hut. Zainab, who had been visiting regularly, looked out the window and froze. "Amina," she whispered urgently. "It's your father." Amina's heart skipped a beat. The chief had not come to see her since the festival. He had heard of her decision to raise her child alone, and she had been avoiding him ever since. She wasn't sure how he would react, but she knew this moment was inevitable. She quickly wrapped her baby in a cloth and set him down on a mat near the hearth. Then, taking a deep breath, Amina walked to the door. The sun had just risen, casting a soft golden light over the village, and as she stepped outside, she saw her father standing in front of her hut. He was a tall, dignified man, his features stern, but there was something in his eyes now that Amina hadn't seen before, a mix of concern and something deeper. For the first time in years, her father looked vulnerable. "Amina," he greeted, his voice rough. "I've come to see you." Amina nodded but didn't speak immediately. She wasn't sure how to start. After everything that had happened, she didn't know if she was ready for this conversation. But her father's presence made it clear that this was a moment they both had to face. "I didn't expect you to come," Amina said quietly, looking down at her hands. Not after everything. Her father sighed heavily, taking a step forward. I know you've been hurt, my daughter, and I know you've made your choice. But I came because I wanted to understand. I wanted to know if I could help. You are my daughter, and I have failed you. In my desire to see you marry well, I lost sight of what truly mattered. Amina's heart softened, but she still felt the sting of everything that had happened. You've always wanted me to marry someone important, father. But that was never what I wanted. I wanted love, I wanted trust, and I never found that in the men you chose for me. I chose to walk away because I couldn't let my life be decided by someone else anymore. Chief Owusu was silent for a moment, as though contemplating her words. Then he spoke again, his voice quieter. I see now that I pushed you too hard. I was blinded by the tradition of our people, by what I thought was best for you. I never saw what you needed. And now, I realize you don't need my approval, you need to be your own woman. Amina blinked in surprise. Her father, the man who had always tried to control her life, was admitting that he had been wrong. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it also felt like a release. Maybe there was still room for healing. You've made mistakes, father. But so have I, Amina said softly. I've spent so much of my life trying to prove myself to you, trying to please you, that I forgot to live for myself. I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I'm doing this for me, for my son. Her father's expression softened, and he took another step closer, his gaze settling on her son, who was now asleep in the hut. You are so much stronger than I gave you credit for, Amina. I can see it in your eyes. You've grown. And as much as it pains me, I understand now that you don't need to follow my path. You have your own. I can only hope that you raise your son in a way that brings him the happiness you never had. Amina felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, father. I don't know if I can ever forgive all the things that have happened, but I can forgive you for this moment. For understanding me. It means more than you know. Her father reached out, and for the first time in many years he hugged her. It was awkward at first, but then Amina relaxed into the embrace, feeling a deep sense of release. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward for both of them. I will always be here for you, Amina, her father said quietly, pulling back to look her in the eye. I want you to know that. You are my daughter, and I will protect you and young Kofi in whatever way I can. Amina nodded, her eyes filled with tears. Thank you, father. In the days that followed, Amina and her father's relationship slowly began to shift. The weight of their past struggles had not disappeared entirely, but there was a sense of mutual respect and understanding that hadn't existed before. Her father made an effort to spend time with her, not to control her or push her into marriage, but simply to be present. He spent time learning about her life as a mother, helping with small tasks when he could, and even assisting in building a small extension to her hut to provide more space for her and Kofi. He also came to the village square to see his grandson, offering gifts and ensuring that Amina knew he wanted to be involved, though not in a way that pressured her into anything she wasn't ready for. It was a delicate balance, but Amina appreciated the change. Life continued in the village, and Amina's son grew stronger each day. As the months passed, she felt more at peace with her decision to raise her child alone. Though the initial fear of being a single mother had been overwhelming, she now found strength in the love of her son and the support of her community. Her father's visits became more frequent, and while they still had their differences, they had found a new rhythm in their relationship. Amina didn't need her father's approval to move forward, but his acceptance and willingness to let go of the past helped her feel more confident in her own choices. She knew that the future would hold many challenges: parenthood, healing, and the remnants of her tangled relationships with the men from her past. But for the first time, Amina felt ready to face it all. She wasn't doing it for anyone else. She was doing it for herself and her child, and that, she realized, was enough. As the days turned into months, Amina's life began to settle into a new routine. She learned to balance her duties as a mother with the demands of the village. Kofi brought her joy, and even though she faced challenges, she no longer felt like she was fighting against the tide. Her father's involvement in her life had softened the burden she had carried for so long. They had found common ground, and while they weren't completely healed, the respect between them had been restored. For Amina, that was enough for now. One evening, as she sat by the fire with Kofi in her arms, Zainab joined her. "How are you feeling, Amina?" Amina smiled, looking down at her child. "Stronger than ever. I'm finally living for me." Zainab raised her eyebrows. "It sounds like you've come a long way." Amina nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "I have, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. The days after her father's visit passed slowly, but Amina felt an internal shift that she couldn't ignore. She had made peace with her past, but the arrival of her son had brought up emotions she hadn't anticipated. For the first time, she was forced to reckon with how alone she had been, how often she had pushed people away in the name of independence. Yet as she held her son in her arms, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry all of her burdens alone. Both Tund and Kwame had been visiting regularly. Tund had begun to show up at her hut often, trying to win her back, saying all the right things that made her feel conflicted. At the same time, Kwame visited less frequently, but always brought gifts, and insisted that he still wanted to be involved in their child's life, even if they weren't together. She assumed he was splitting time between his two young children. Despite everything, the idea of raising a child as a single mother was harder than she had imagined, and her heart began to soften toward both men. She found herself wondering what life would be like if she allowed herself to love again. Could she trust either of them? Would either of them truly be the kind of father she wanted for her child? These thoughts swirled in her head as she tried to focus on her son, but the presence of Tund's words and Kwame's offers of support kept tugging at her heart. Neither of them had moved on to new relationships. Tund's persistence seemed to stir something inside her, a longing she thought had died. He had always been gentle with her, and despite his mistakes, there was something in his eyes that told her he was sorry, that he understood what he had done. But Kwame, he had been distant at first, then unexpectedly generous. He had changed, but was it enough? Amina wasn't sure who she was leaning toward, if she could lean toward anyone at all. But one thing was clear. Her heart was slowly beginning to open, not just to the men, but to the idea of building a family. Amina had just finished feeding Kofi when she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching her hut. Zainab, who had been helping her with the baby, turned her head sharply. There was something in her eyes that made Amina sit up straight. "What? Who is it?" Amina asked quietly, already dreading who it could be. "It's Aisha," Zainab answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Kwame's former, the one who tried to trap him. Amina's stomach churned. She had heard of Aisha before, Kwame's former lover, who had become obsessed with securing her position beside him. She didn't expect this confrontation to be pleasant, but she certainly hadn't expected it now, not when she was trying to come to terms with her own life, her son, and the men in her life. Amina pushed herself up from the low wooden stool, cradling her son in her arms. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Let's get this over with," she muttered to Zainab, before stepping out into the bright afternoon light. Aisha was standing just outside the entrance to the hut, her posture stiff and commanding, a perfect image of the woman who thought she was entitled to more than she had ever been given. She looked older than Amina remembered beautiful, but there was still a hunger in her eyes, an intense, bitter hunger that now turned towards Amina. Amina squared her shoulders and made her way toward Aisha, holding her son closer. As soon as she was within earshot, Aisha's voice sliced through the air. "You think you've won, don't you?" Aisha's tone was filled with venom, each word laced with resentment. Her eyes flicked down to Amina's son, then back up to Amina's face. "You think that child has given you something that I could never have." Amina's heart skipped a beat, but she held her composure. "What are you talking about, Aisha?" Aisha stepped closer, her lips curling into a thin, bitter smile. "I've been watching from the sidelines, Amina. I know exactly what you've done. You thought you could have it all by getting pregnant. You thought that child would make Kwame stay, make him choose you over me. But here's the truth, you didn't win. You just forced him into a corner, and now I have to deal with the mess you've made." Amina's gaze hardened. "I didn't force anyone into anything. You're the one who got pregnant on purpose. You thought that a baby would make Kwame fall in love with you, didn't you?" Aisha's nostrils flared, and she took a step forward. "I didn't just get pregnant, Amina. I saw a future. My future with Kwame. He had his own wealth, yes, and some level of status. But he was tied to the royal family. Your family. And the influence he could wield. I thought if I had his baby, I could position myself to share in those benefits. I thought I could finally get the life I deserved by standing at his side. But you came along and all of that changed. You're the one with true status, with the wealth that's tied directly to the power of your daddy, the chief. You have everything, Amina. Everything that could have been mine too." Amina's eyes widened in shock, but she didn't show any sympathy. "And you think I'm to blame for that? For you trying to use a baby to climb the social ladder?" Aisha's voice trembled with barely contained rage. "Yes, you ruined everything. Kwame would have been mine if it wasn't for you. He was mine to claim, And then you showed up. Every time I looked at him, he only spoke about you. He only ever wanted you, even after everything. And I had to watch him pine for you. He could never get over you, Amina. It's because of you that he never truly looked at me. All those months I spent trying to build something with him, and every time he looked at me, he saw you. And now I'm stuck with the fallout of all this. I'm left with nothing. Amina stood still, absorbing the weight of Aisha's words. The guilt she had tried to bury over her past actions stirred deep within her. But she quickly shook it off. You think I made him love me, Aisha? You think I'm responsible for Kwame not choosing you? Amina said, her voice cold. You think you can blame me for your own choices, your own failures? You chose to get pregnant to trap him. And now you want to act like I'm the villain? I didn't force you into anything. What happened between Kwame and me, it's ours, not yours. Aisha's lips trembled with frustration. You don't get it, do you? Kwame is still in love with you. He's always been in love with you. Even when we were together, he spoke your name in his sleep. He would talk about how you used to look at him, how you'd smile at him in the old days. Every time he thought of you, it was like I didn't even exist. Amina felt a pang in her chest. She had known about Kwame's feelings for her, but hearing it laid out so plainly felt different. It was a reality she had been too afraid to face, and Aisha was right to remind her of it. You've got a lot of nerve blaming me for that, Amina said, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her voice. I didn't ask him to love me, and I didn't ask you to try to trap him with a child. That's on you, not me. Aisha's eyes were now filled with rage. I had no choice. What was I supposed to do? Watch you take everything I wanted? You think this is just about you? You think you can raise a child and have Kwame's help and connection to your father, while I'm left with nothing? Amina met her gaze unflinchingly. What you do with your life, Aisha, is up to you. I'm not here to fight you for Kwame. I'm raising my son, and I'll do it my way. You don't have to like it, but I won't apologize for what I've done. And if you think that means I owe you something, you're wrong. Aisha's eyes burned with fury. And what about me? What about the life I've been building with him? You've torn everything apart. And now you think you can walk away from this unscathed. There was a long, tense silence between them. Aisha's face was red with fury, her fists clenched so tightly that her knuckles whitened. But Amina wasn't afraid. She had been through worse. Aisha stood in stunned silence for a moment, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. You think you've done the right thing? You think this is just about your son? Amina's voice softened slightly. It is about him. But it's also about us, about understanding that we're all connected now. Our sons are brothers. We can fight all we want, but the truth is, no matter how much we hate each other, our children deserve to know each other. Finally, Aisha spoke, her voice quieter but still filled with venom. Just know this, Amina. I won't back down. I won't let you take everything from me. I will make sure our sons know each other, and you won't stand in my way. You'll regret ever crossing me. Amina didn't respond. She turned and walked back toward her hut, holding her son tightly in her arms. As she stepped inside, she heard Aisha's retreating footsteps behind her, but she didn't look back. She had made her peace. She had no intention of letting Aisha or anyone else dictate her life. Her future, her son's future. It was in her hands now, and she would protect it at all costs. Amina sat in the quiet of her hut, Kofi asleep in her arms, the weight of Aisha's words still hanging in the air. She had always known that there were people who envied her, but hearing Aisha's raw, bitter emotions made her question everything. She looked down at her son, who was nestled in her arms. Was she really doing the right thing? Was everything she had built with Kwame really hers to keep? Or had it been a consequence of her own choices, selfish in ways she hadn't fully realized? Her mind raced and her heart clenched. She wasn't sure anymore. A knock at the door broke her from her thoughts. Startled, she quickly stood, carefully placing Kofi in the cradle. She went to the door, ready to face whatever the next chapter of her life would bring. Kwame stood outside her door, his figure silhouetted against the fading light of the evening. He had been a constant in her life since childhood, but now, it felt like there were more questions than answers between them. "Amina," he said softly, his voice a mixture of caution and longing. She stepped aside to let him in, though her thoughts were clouded with the remnants of her conversation with Aisha. She hadn't been expecting him tonight, but it seemed his presence was unavoidable. Kwame took a deep breath as he walked inside. He noticed the cradle first, and for a moment his eyes softened. "Look at him, lil' man is growing quickly," he murmured. "He's going to be a strong one." Amina nodded, her eyes following Kwame's gaze as he looked at the baby. Her heart ached, but she didn't know how to let him in any deeper. "I never wanted this," she began, her voice strained. Not this confusion, not this mess. Aisha, she's right about one thing. You and I, we never really finished what we started. Kwame's face darkened at the mention of Aisha, and he crossed the room to stand beside Amina. He reached out, gently touching her shoulder. I'm sorry she came by. I never stopped loving you, Amina, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I need you to understand something. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, not Aisha and least of all you. I'm here for you and for our son. I'm here to stay. Amina looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't pull away from his touch. But you don't get it, Kwame, she whispered. We can't just pretend things will go back to how they were. Too much has happened. He looked into her eyes, the sadness in his own evident. Then let's build something new. We can start fresh, Amina. We owe it to ourselves and to him. Amina bit her lip, trying to hold back the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. She was torn between the past and the future, between the man she once loved and the man who had always been there for her. The next morning, Amina sat by the window, gazing out at the village. The weight of everything, her past choices, Aisha's anger, Kwame's unwavering devotion, pressed heavily on her shoulders. She could feel her father's watchful eye on her too. Chief Owusu had made it clear that Amina's marriage was important for the family's status and influence. He had even gone so far as to suggest new potential suitors from other influential families. But Amina knew deep down that none of them had ever felt right to her. They were polite, respectful, and wealthy, yet none had made her heart stir like Kwame had. None had ever truly seen her for who she was the way Kwame had. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. She turned to see Zainab standing in the doorway, a concerned look on her face. Everything all right? Zainab asked. Amina sighed and walked to the door, letting her friend in. I don't know, Zainab. It's all a mess. Kwame came by this morning, and now I'm just lost. Zainab raised an eyebrow. You know he still loves you, right? Amina nodded. I know, but it's complicated. He's been with Aisha, and I can't just pretend like nothing happened. I don't know how to fix this. Zainab sat down beside her. You don't need to fix it, Amina. I keep telling you, you need to figure out what you want. And that might mean letting go of the past, even if it's hard. Amina stared at Kofi, who was now waking up, and she thought about what Zainab had said. The future was hers to shape, but she was still holding on to the past. Later that afternoon, Amina's father, Chief Owusu, arrived at her hut. His presence always commanded respect, but today there was something else in his demeanor. His face was serious, and Amina could see the weight of responsibility in his eyes. Amina, he said in his deep, commanding voice, we need to talk. She motioned for him to sit. Kofi was sleeping again in the cradle, and Amina had time to focus on the conversation ahead. Father, what is it? Amina asked, already sensing that her father had something on his mind. Amina, it is time for you to decide. The royal family expects you to make a choice. It is not only about love. It is about the future of this village and your role in it. You must choose carefully, for your choice will affect not just your future, but that of the entire community. Amina felt that old, cold weight settle in her stomach. You want me to choose someone based on what benefits the village? You want me to marry for power? Her father's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. I want you to consider what's best for your future, Amina. The royal family, Kwame's position with us, and the alliances we can form, it matters. It's not just about love. It's about ensuring stability for our people. Amina's chest tightened, her father's words hanging heavily between them. I understand your concerns, father, she said quietly. But I also know that love isn't something that can be ignored. I've learned that the hard way. Her father nodded slowly. Do not let your heart cloud your judgment, Amina. There is much at stake. Amina stood by the window, staring out over the village. She had always been a part of the people, never putting herself above anyone else. She was the daughter of the chief, yes, but she had never let it define her. Her wealth, her status, had always felt secondary to her real connection with the villagers. But now, with the future of her son and her love life hanging in the balance, the reality of her position as the princess was undeniable. Her father was right, there was so much at stake. Marrying the right person could ensure the prosperity of the village, securing her father's legacy and her family's influence. Yet her heart ached for something more than alliances and power. She longed for true love, for the kind of connection she had once shared with Kwame. But now, with Aisha's bitterness and the confusion surrounding Kofi's paternity, everything felt more complicated than ever. As she watched the sun set over the village, Amina knew that the time had come to make a decision. It was no longer just about her. It was about the future of her family, her village, and the son she loved so deeply. The days that followed were heavy with silence and contemplation. Amina could feel the weight of her royal title pressing against her every step, a constant reminder that her actions had consequences beyond herself. It wasn't just her heart she was balancing now. It was the future of her people, the legacy of her family, and the security of the village her father had built. She had never asked for this burden, but as the daughter of the chief, it was one she could not escape. The villagers adored her for her kindness and humility, but the reality was that she was the princess. And soon she would need to choose a husband, not for love alone, but for the sake of her family and their standing in the village. Her father's words echoed in her mind. "Do not let your heart cloud your judgment." Amina turned her attention to Kofi, who was now toddling around the room, his tiny hands reaching for anything he could grasp. She smiled softly at the sight, but then the familiar tension returned. What was the right choice? Could she ever put her heart aside for the sake of duty? Amina had hoped the encounter with Aisha had cleared the air, but she had underestimated just how deep the resentment ran. Aisha's bitterness had only grown, and it wasn't just because of the tangled love story with Kwame. Aisha saw Amina as the obstacle between her and the life she had envisioned for herself. Amina had thought Aisha might be pacified, that she would eventually accept the truth that she and Kwame had no future together. But Aisha had made it clear that she blamed Amina for everything. She had come to Amina's hut, again uninvited, her eyes narrowed in fury. "You took him from me," Aisha spat, her voice shaking with anger. "I got pregnant for him, did everything I could to make him love me, and now he's still obsessed with you. Do you think I don't see it?" Amina stood her ground. "I never asked for any of this, Aisha. You think it was easy for me? Do you think I wanted to hurt you? You've made choices and I've made mine. But don't blame me for everything." Aisha's face twisted with emotion. "You're just like your father, so focused on what's best for the village and your family, you'll trample over anyone who stands in your way. Well, I've got news for you. I won't let you get away with this. Kwame belongs with me, not you." Amina took a deep breath, holding back her own rising anger. "Kwame has never been mine to claim. I won't fight you for him, Aisha. But don't ever think that I didn't care about him. And don't ever think I'll let you control this narrative either." Aisha stormed out of the hut, leaving Amina standing in the midst of the tension, feeling more lost than ever. Kwame had always been a steady presence in Amina's life, a man of integrity and strength. But even he was beginning to feel the pressure. He had been so focused on Amina that he hadn't truly examined the situation with Aisha and the son they shared until now. After Amina's visit from Aisha, he found himself standing alone at the riverbank, watching the water flow by. He had promised to stay by Amina's side and support her, but there were parts of him that felt like he had failed her. The news of Aisha's pregnancy and the complications that followed had shaken him to his core. How could he reconcile his love for Amina with his responsibilities to his sons? How could he stand by her side when the rest of the world seemed intent on tearing them apart? He sighed, his mind racing. He hadn't wanted any of this. He had just wanted to be the man Amina needed. Someone she could count on, someone who would always be there. But now, the path ahead seemed clouded with uncertainty. And all the while, Amina was slipping further away, caught in the midst of her family's expectations and her own desires. Amina's father arrived once again, this time with a purpose. His visits had grown more frequent, and his patience was wearing thin. He had made his expectations clear from the beginning. Amina needed to make a choice soon. The future of the royal family and the future of the village depended on it. "Amina, you've had enough time to decide," he said, his voice as stern as ever. "You need to take responsibility for your position. You are the future of this village, and I expect you to act like it." Amina clenched her fists, her anger rising. "And what exactly am I supposed to do, father? Marry for the sake of politics? For the sake of status? I'm not some pawn you can place in a marriage for a political alliance." Her father's eyes softened for a moment. "I don't want to see you unhappy, but you must understand the bigger picture. You are not just my daughter, Amina. You are the future of our people, and you must make your decision with that in mind." Amina's heart clenched. Was her love for Kwame worth risking everything? The future of the village, the legacy of her family. It all rested on her shoulders. As the sun set over the village, Amina found herself alone, staring at her reflection in the still waters of the river. She had spent so much of her life fighting against the expectations of royalty, wanting nothing more than to be a part of the village, to blend in with the people she loved. But now it seemed as though she could no longer escape her destiny. The crown had been passed down to her, whether she wanted it or not. And no matter how hard she fought against it, she had to make a choice, one that would affect the village, her family, and her future. Amina looked at the baby, asleep in her arms. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest. She had to choose. But could she choose love and sacrifice the future of her people? The quiet night air swirled in the courtyard, as Amina sat alone, her thoughts racing. She had spent so many nights reflecting on the man who had come to her during the festival. The masked stranger who had spoken to her in a language only her heart understood. The bond between them had been immediate, electric, and undeniable. But everything had changed when the mask was removed. She had expected to see the man who had stolen her heart, but instead she had found Tund. The realization was like a shockwave tearing through her soul. It was Tund, someone who had also held her heart, but in a way this felt like a betrayal. Kwame had been the first to wear the mask. It had been his voice, his words, his warmth that had touched Amina's heart in a way she never thought possible. He had been the one to make her fall in love, the one who had been there for her when she was unsure and lost. It was Kwame who had played the part of the mysterious man in her dreams, and it was his touch that had made her feel complete. Now Tund stood before her, the revelation clear in his eyes. He had worn the mask on the night of the reveal. Tund loved her. Amina could feel it in the sincerity of his words. But that love had come at the cost of her heart's confusion. Why Tund? Amina's voice trembled as she met his gaze. She asked him what felt like the 50th time. Why did you take his place? Why did you wear the mask? And again the answer was the same. Tund's face softened, regret clouding his expression. Because I saw how close you were getting to him. I saw the way you looked at the masked man, and I couldn't stand to lose you. I wanted you to see me, Amina, to see me the way you had seen him. Amina's heart was torn. She had fallen in love with the masked stranger, but now she was faced with two men who had each taken turns wearing the mask for different reasons. Tund's love was genuine, but he had deceived her, just as much as Kwame had. I don't know what to believe anymore, Tund, Amina whispered, the weight of her emotions heavy on her chest. I loved him, and now I feel like I've lost him. Tund reached out, gently taking her hand. You haven't lost him, and you haven't lost me either. I love you, Amina, and I will always love you. Amina pulled her hand back, the confusion too much to bear. I gotta go, she said, her voice cracking. I need to figure out what I want, and who I truly love. Tund nodded, understanding the pain in her words. He turned to leave, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he had once again caused her pain. But this time, he had no choice but to step back and let her make her decision. The sun had barely begun to set when Amina heard the unmistakable sound of royal footsteps approaching her hut. Her father, Chief Owusu, and her mother, Queen Asmara, were coming. Amina stood quickly, her heart pounding. Their visits always carried weight, but today felt different. The tension between her and her father had been building, and she was certain this visit would not be easy. When they arrived, her father nodded at her with his usual calm authority, but her mother's gaze was sharp, determined. Amina, Chief Owusu said, his voice low but firm, we need to discuss your future. The time has come for you to make a decision, and we are not leaving until we have a plan in place. Amina nodded, steeling herself for what was coming. Her mother's presence was commanding, and Amina knew she would be just as resolute in her opinion as her father. Queen Asmara spoke up, her voice sharp and clear. You've always been good about following the village's customs, Amina. But now you must decide not just for yourself, but for the future of this village, our legacy, and the generations to come. You cannot allow your emotions to blind you to what needs to be done. Amina felt her chest tighten at her mother's words. This wasn't just about her and Kwame anymore. It was about the entire village. Amina had always known the importance of her royal role, but the weight of it felt crushing now. I understand, Mother, Amina said, though she could hardly bring herself to speak the words. But I don't know if I can make this decision alone. Her mother's eyes softened for a moment, but then they hardened again as she turned to her father. Do you remember Owusu? She said suddenly, her voice rising with frustration. How your own parents didn't approve of me? How they thought I was too young, too unimportant to marry you. Amina's father looked taken aback, his calm demeanor slipping for a moment. Asmara, he began, but she cut him off. It's easy for you to forget now that you're the chief of this village, but you were not always this powerful. My parents did not want me to marry you. They didn't think you were worthy of me, Owusu. And now, I'm telling you the same thing I heard my mother say to my father back then. Do not push your daughter into a marriage because of your pride or your position. She has the right to make her own choices, even if it means breaking tradition." There was a long silence. Amina watched the two of them, her heart pounding as she witnessed the rare flash of tension between them. It was clear that this conversation wasn't just about her. It was about their entire marriage, their legacy, and their choices as rulers of the village. Finally, Chief Owusu sighed, his usual composure returning. "You're right, Asmara," he said quietly. "But Amina still needs to decide. It's time she took her place in the world, whether she likes it or not." Amina looked at her mother, who met her gaze with a mix of sympathy and resolve. "You must choose, Amina. But remember, your future is not only about what you want, but what is best for everyone." Amina sat quietly long after her parents had left, their words echoing in her mind. She had always been the one to forge her own path, to take the road less traveled. But now her choices were limited. The future of the village, her family's legacy, and her son's future all rested on her decision. She thought about the men in her life, Kwame, Tund, and even the possibility of a marriage that could secure her family's position. But none of these choices were simple. Each one carried weight. Each one was tied to the past in ways she couldn't quite understand. Her heart ached as she thought about Kwame's unwavering love for her. He had never stopped loving her, even when the world had torn them apart. Could she choose him? Could she risk everything for love, knowing the consequences of her actions? Or should she choose a marriage that would solidify her role as a princess? A union that would ensure her family's security and that of the village? Her heart was torn, but she knew one thing for certain. The time for indecision was over. A choice had to be made, and Amina knew that whichever path she chose, she would never be the same. The night had grown late, and Amina found herself alone in her chambers, trying to process everything that had unfolded. Her mind was still reeling from Tund's confession. She had loved the masked man, the one who had spoken to her, who had made her feel like she was the only person in the world. That man had been Kwame, but now that truth seemed like a distant memory. She had come to terms with the fact that Kwame had been the first to wear the mask, but what she didn't know was why he disappeared. It wasn't until Tund had confessed that she understood. Tund had loved her from the very start, and he had worn the mask on the night of the reveal to keep her close. But in doing so, he had crossed a line, one that she wasn't sure she could forgive. As she sat in the silence of her room, she thought of Kwame. His love had been real, deep, and genuine. He had given her so much of himself, and she had fallen for him. But now that she knew the truth about Tund, Amina couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and regret. She wanted to believe that there was still a chance for her and Kwame. But now, Tund had put a shadow over that possibility, and she wasn't sure where that left her. Was she supposed to choose between the man who had given her everything, or the one who had tried to claim her heart by wearing a mask? Amina buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. She couldn't ignore the love she had for both men, but she also couldn't ignore the fact that one had deceived her in the most painful way. She needed answers, and the only way to find them was to face Kwame. Again, Amina's heart beat in her chest as she made her way toward the garden where Kwame had been waiting for her. The cool night air didn't help ease her nerves. If anything, it seemed to amplify the tension in her stomach. It reminded her of a cool night many months ago. She had spent days avoiding him, unsure of what to say, uncertain of how to explain the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. As she approached, she saw Kwame sitting by a small fire, his face illuminated by the warm glow. He looked up at her, his expression soft but tired, as if he had been waiting for this moment just as long as she had. "Amina," he said her name quietly, almost as though he had been calling it out in his thoughts for days. "I didn't expect you to come. I know things are complicated between us right now." Amina stood still for a moment, unsure of how to start. The words she had rehearsed in her mind felt inadequate, but she knew she had to speak. She had to find clarity, not just for herself, but for the future of her heart. "Kwame," Amina said, finally finding her voice. "I don't know what to say. Everything's so tangled. I thought you were the man behind the mask. I fell in love with you in that disguise. But now, with Tund, I'm lost. He wore the mask after you, and he told me everything." Kwame's face remained calm, though there was a flicker of pain in his eyes. "I never meant for you to be hurt, Amina. I know I've made mistakes. When I wore that mask, it wasn't just about hiding my face. It was about protecting myself, too. I didn't want you to know the truth until I was sure of where I stood with you. But then I saw how close you were to Tund, and I knew I couldn't hide forever." Amina's heart ached at his words. But you didn't have to hide it all, Kwame. You should have told me the truth from the beginning. We could have figured it out together. Kwame sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting her gaze again. I was afraid, Amina. Afraid that if I told you the truth, you would choose someone else. Afraid that you wouldn't feel the same way about me once you knew. But I was wrong. I should have trusted you. Amina felt a tear slip down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. I don't know what to do anymore, Kwame. I don't know who I'm supposed to be with. You both love me, and I love you both. But this has gone too far. Kwame's expression softened, and he stood up slowly, walking toward her. Amina, you don't have to decide right now. I just want you to know one thing. I love you. I always have. And no matter what happens, I will always love you. Amina looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had known Kwame for so long, and his love had been a constant in her life. But now there was Tund, who had worn the mask, who had claimed to love her, and whose presence made her heart race in ways she hadn't expected. I need time, Amina whispered, her voice barely audible. I need to figure out who I am before I can choose anyone. Kwame nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. I'll wait for you, Amina. But just know that I'm here, always. Amina's life had become a whirlwind of emotions, conflicting loyalties, and decisions she wasn't sure she was ready to make. It had been days since her conversation with Kwame, and she had yet to find the clarity she so desperately needed. But now, something else was coming. Yet another visit from her parents, the chief and queen of the village. As the royal family arrived at Amina's residence, she felt the weight of their presence. Her father, Chief Owusuf, was a man of great authority, his stature commanding respect wherever he went. His gaze was sharp, always calculating, always watching. By his side was Queen Asmara, Amina's mother, whose grace and regal presence were matched only by her sharp tongue when needed. Amina, the chief began, his voice steady and authoritative. It has come to my attention that there is unrest in the village, and your personal life has become complicated. You have to see that you are a princess, and as such, you have responsibilities. Amina nodded, though the mention of her duties only made her feel more trapped. She had always known her role, but now, everything felt like a burden. I understand, father, she replied, her voice tinged with a mixture of frustration and resignation. The queen, who had been silently observing the exchange, suddenly spoke, her tone biting. Don't pretend, Amina. We both know this isn't just about the village. You're avoiding the decisions you need to make. You've always been the one to act like you didn't care about the weight of your title, but I am the one who has had to bear the consequences of that. Amina looked at her mother, her heart pounding. What do you mean, mother? What did she mean? The queen's eyes narrowed as she looked at the chief. I was a young princess once. My parents didn't approve of my choice to marry him. They disapproved of your father long before he became the chief. And when they looked at me, they saw someone who had made a foolish choice. A choice that I had to defend, even when I didn't want to. And now, here you are, making choices for love when you should be making them for your people. The chief's eyes flashed with irritation, but he said nothing. Amina could feel the weight of her mother's words, the unspoken resentment that had never truly been resolved between her parents. Mother, father, Amina began, her voice softening. I know my responsibilities, but I am also a woman, and I can't live my life just to meet expectations. I need to make my own choices. The queen let out a bitter laugh, her eyes cold. You think I didn't want that too, Amina? You think I didn't want to be free of my title, my position? But you are the daughter of a chief, and with that comes expectations. And when you make choices like the ones you've made, you drag all of us down. The tension in the room thickened. Amina's heart was heavy with the burden of her title, her mother's words, and the choices she had yet to make. She knew she had to find a way to balance love with duty, but it wasn't going to be easy. Amina stood silently, feeling the weight of her mother's words pressing down on her like a heavy stone. Her mind raced, but she couldn't form a response that felt right. Her mother's bitterness, the lingering resentments, and the unspoken history between her parents, they all felt like a shadow over her life. She knew the chief had always been a man of authority, but hearing her mother's accusations, hearing the pain in her voice, made Amina realize just how deep those old wounds ran. The queen's voice softened slightly, but the sting of her words remained. You don't understand, Amina. When you are born into royalty, there is no escaping it. Your choices aren't just your own, they affect everyone. You can't just run off and follow your heart. I'm not running away, mother, Amina responded, her voice trembling but firm. But I can't ignore the fact that I am a woman with my own heart, my own desires. I don't want to be trapped by expectations. I need to make my own path. The queen's eyes softened for a moment, a hint of regret flickering across her face. I didn't want to be trapped either, Amina. But it happened. You'll understand one day. You're still young. You have time to figure it out, even if it doesn't feel like it now. Amina felt a pang in her chest. She wanted to tell her mother that she was already figuring it out. She wanted to tell her that she wasn't so different from her mother after all, that she too had dreams and desires beyond what was expected of her. But instead, she remained silent, knowing that her mother's understanding, if it came at all, would take time. The chief, who had been silent for much of the conversation, now stepped forward. His presence was commanding, as always. He looked at Amina with a mixture of pride and concern. "Amina, you are my daughter. You are a princess," he said, his tone steady. "But you are also the future of this village. We need to ensure that you are making the right choices, not just for yourself, but for all of us. Your relationship with Kwame, with Tund, those are matters of the heart, but they also affect the village. Our people look to us for guidance." Amina felt a wave of frustration wash over her. It was always about the village, always about the duty. But she was still a woman, still someone who had the right to choose who she loved, who she wanted to be with. Why couldn't they understand that? "I know my duty," she said, her voice cold and steady now. "But my heart is my own, father. I'm not just a symbol. I'm not just a pawn in a game." The chief's eyes narrowed, and for a moment there was tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. But then he sighed, his shoulders relaxing just slightly. "I know," he said, his voice softening. "And I will support you in your choices, Amina. But understand that sometimes the weight of your choices may feel heavier than you expect." Amina nodded, the conversation weighing on her more than she expected. Her father's approval had always been important to her. But in that moment, she realized how difficult it was to truly live up to the legacy of the royal family. It was a responsibility that loomed over her, whether she liked it or not. As the chief and queen began to leave, Amina remained standing by the fire, her heart heavy. She needed to figure out what to do next. Her heart was torn between two men, each of whom had shaped her life in different ways. But her duty to her family, her people, was something she couldn't ignore. Amina sat across from her best friend, Zainab, in the quiet corner of her home, a board spread out before them. Zainab's gaze flickered between the board and Amina, waiting for her to say something. The two of them had been talking for hours now, but it felt as though the conversation had gotten nowhere. Amina was still stuck in her thoughts, torn between so many emotions, so many men, so many unanswered questions. "So," Zainab began, tapping her pen against the table, "are we doing this or what?" Amina let out a slow sigh, her fingers running over the board that had been divided into columns. There were 4 names on it, each one with a row of pros and cons underneath. "All right," Amina finally said. "I'm doing this. We'll write down what's good about each of them and what's bad. Maybe if I see it all laid out, it'll help me figure it out." Zainab smiled, picking up her pen with a flourish. "I knew you'd come around. So who are we starting with?" Amina hesitated before speaking, her eyes scanning the names. "Let's start with Kwame." Zainab nodded and jotted down Kwame at the top of one of the columns. "What's good about him?" Amina bit her lip, thinking carefully. "He's steady. He's always been there for me. He's strong and I can trust him. He's good with my family and the villagers. He's reliable." "Sounds perfect," Zainab said, her voice light. "Now the bad stuff." Amina paused. "He's so serious, always thinking about responsibilities. Sometimes I wonder if he's really happy. And there's his other son. That's a whole mess." Zainab scribbled the notes down. "Okay, we'll see if that outweighs the good. Who's next?" Amina's hand lingered over Tund's name. "Tund," she said quietly. "He's charming. He's passionate. And he really knows how to make me feel special. He's not like Kwame. He doesn't take things too seriously all the time. He makes me feel alive." Zainab arched an eyebrow, her pen hovering over the board. "And the cons?" Amina sighed. "The deception. The mask. He tricked me into falling for him, and that's hard to overlook. Even though I know he loves me, it feels like he wasn't honest from the start." Zainab quickly wrote that down and looked up expectantly. "Next." Amina glanced at the remaining 2 names. She knew what was coming, but it still hurt to think about. "The suitors the chief sent. Let's be real, Amina. They're not exactly your type, are they?" Zainab asked, half smiling. Amina laughed bitterly. "Not exactly, no. They're nice men, respectable, but they don't excite me. They're good matches in terms of status and family connections. But I can't picture myself with any of them." Zainab shook her head. So, not much to say for them, then? No, Amina said, shaking her head. But I can't just reject them. My father expects something. He'll be furious if I refuse them all. Zainab's eyes softened. I know, but Amina, your heart has to be in it. You can't marry someone just because they're a good fit on paper. You deserve more than that. Amina let out a long breath, feeling the weight of everything that had been building inside her for weeks. The board in front of her felt like a representation of the choices she had to make, each one with its own set of pros and cons, but none of them feeling like the right answer. Thanks for helping me see it all like this, Amina said, pushing the board aside. It didn't make the decision easier, though. Zainab smiled gently. I don't think it was ever meant to. You've got to figure this one out on your own. But just remember, no one's perfect. And sometimes love doesn't make sense. The wind had picked up quickly, the sky turning an angry shade of gray as the storm clouds gathered. Amina looked out the window, the darkened skies signaling the arrival of a violent thunderstorm. She had just finished an exhausting day and was hoping for some peace. But the weather was about to make things far from calm. Zainab, sitting beside Amina, looked up at the window with a concerned frown. This one's going to be bad. Maybe we should stay inside. Amina nodded, her gaze drifting to the distant horizon. It feels like the storm's been brewing for days. The first bolt of lightning struck, lighting up the sky with a blinding flash. The thunder came moments later, a deafening rumble that made the walls of the house tremble. Amina felt a chill run down her spine as the storm roared into life. Just as the first heavy drops of rain began to batter the window, there was a knock on the door. Amina frowned. Who could possibly be visiting in this weather? She stood up, walking cautiously to the door. As she opened it, she found herself face to face with Kwame. His clothes were soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead, and his expression one of determination and concern. Amina, he said, his voice low but urgent. I had to make sure you were all right. The storm, it came out of nowhere. I wanted to check on you and the baby. Amina stood in the doorway, taken aback by his sudden appearance. The rain was pouring down in sheets, and she could feel the cold wind sweeping through the door. But before she could say anything, the sound of another knock interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Tun standing in the rain, equally soaked, his usual confident demeanor replaced with a look of worry. Amina, he said, his voice almost lost in the storm's fury. I couldn't let you be alone in this. I know you're worried about the baby. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Amina blinked, her heart pounding in her chest as she looked between the two men. The storm outside seemed to pale in comparison to the one that had just been unleashed in her own heart. Kwame stepped forward, his voice growing softer as he spoke. You don't need to do this alone, Amina. I'll always be here for you. You know that, right? Tun's eyes flickered with something more, a deeper pain. I didn't mean to complicate things, Amina. But I care about you. I've always cared about you. And I want to be there for you. No matter what. The two men stood there, soaked to the bone, both looking at her as if waiting for something, anything, from her. Amina felt as though the weight of the world had descended upon her shoulders. She wanted to tell them both everything, to explain how she felt, but she couldn't find the right words. Zainab, who had quietly entered the room behind her, gave Amina a knowing look, as if silently reminding her that the decision was hers to make. For a long moment, Amina stood there in silence, the storm outside and the tension in the room swirling together in an overwhelming rush of emotions. She glanced at both Kwame and Tund, both men who had been a part of her life in different ways, both men who had come to care for her, each in their own way. She finally spoke, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and confusion. Why are you both here? In this storm? Risking your lives just to check on me? Kwame's eyes softened. Because I care about you. And because I can't stand the thought of you being alone, especially with everything that's happened. Tun nodded, stepping a little closer. I'm not asking for anything, Amina, but I need you to know how I feel. I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. Amina closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her racing heart. She wanted to say something, anything, but nothing felt right. The emotions were too tangled, too complicated. Zainab, seeing her best friend's turmoil, gently grabbed her hand and led her toward the couch. You don't have to decide now, Amina. Take your time. But the storm outside wasn't going to give her that luxury. The storm outside howled, shaking the walls of Amina's home. The wind whistled through the cracks in the windows, and the rain lashed violently against the roof. Amina stood in the middle of the room, overwhelmed by the tension between the two men before her, Kwame and Tund. Both of them were drenched, their clothes sticking to their bodies as they stood in the doorway, concern etched on their faces. Amina hadn't expected them to come at the same time, especially not during a storm like this. But here they were, both equally eager to check on her and the baby. Kwame was the first to speak. "Amina, I couldn't stay away. The storm is terrible, but I had to make sure you were all right." Tun nodded, wiping water from his face. "I couldn't just sit in the rain, knowing you were here alone. I needed to know you were safe." Amina's heart raced in her chest. Both men had valid reasons for being there. Both had always shown her kindness. But as her gaze flickered between them, she couldn't shake the inner turmoil swirling in her mind. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside her heart. Before she could respond, the door creaked open once more. Amina's head whipped around in surprise. The gust of wind blew the door open wider, and a tall figure stood in the doorway, his silhouette dark against the lightning flashing in the distance. In the dim light, the figure stood framed in the doorway. It was a man, tall, with a commanding presence. The man was drenched, his clothes soaked through, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. But it wasn't just the storm that made her heart stop. It was the undeniable recognition that gripped her. A man she had never seen before, yet something about him felt eerily familiar. Amina's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes locked on the stranger. "Who are you?" The man stepped forward, his gaze never wavering from hers. "I'm here to tell you the truth, Amina." Kwame and Tund exchanged confused glances, both stepping back as the man entered the room. They were clearly startled by the unexpected arrival. Amina's heart raced as the storm outside intensified, almost as if the heavens themselves were reacting to the storm in her heart. She took a cautious step back. "The truth? What truth?" The man didn't waste time. "The truth about your family. The truth about your father." Amina blinked, her breath catching in her throat. "My father?" The storm outside raged on, but inside the room, an oppressive silence hung in the air. There was this uninvited stranger who was in her house speaking of her father in a way that unsettled her. Kwame stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "Amina, what is this man talking about? What's going on?" Amina couldn't take her eyes off the stranger. Something about him was pulling her in. She couldn't explain it, but there was a deep familiarity in his gaze. The way he looked at her, it felt like something buried deep inside her was stirring to life. "I'm here because you need to know the truth," the man continued, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable weight. "Your father, the man you've always known as your father, is not your biological father." Amina took a step back, her mind reeling. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man sighed, his expression softening. "I know this is hard to hear, but I am your real father. I've been watching over you from afar for years, but I couldn't come to you until now. You deserve to know the truth." He stepped forward, his eyes locking with hers. There was no mistaking the resemblance. Amina's breath caught in her throat. "I am your father," he said simply. Amina's mind raced as the man's words sank in. Her body trembled, and she felt like the room was spinning. The man's words were like a punch to her chest. Her mind couldn't process what he was saying. She had always thought the chief was her father. He had raised her, cared for her, and loved her as his own. The thought that everything she had known could be a lie was too much to comprehend. "Impossible," Amina whispered. This can't be true." The man stepped closer, his eyes filled with regret and sorrow. "I know this is difficult to accept, Amina, but it's the truth. I'm your real father. The chief, he's not your father. He raised you, but he's not the man you think he is." Amina's breath hitched in her throat. She looked toward Kwame, then Tund, but neither of them spoke. They were both just as stunned as she was, unsure of what to make of this new revelation. The stranger's voice softened. "I know it's hard, Amina, but now that you're a mother, I had to come forward. It's time for you to understand who you really are." Amina didn't know what to say. She couldn't process this information. The chief had always been there for her. How could he not be her real father? She had trusted him her entire life. He had been a constant, loving presence, and now this man, this stranger, was telling her everything she thought she knew was wrong. Tund finally spoke, his voice a mix of confusion and concern. "Amina, this doesn't make sense. What is he saying? Is he lying?" Kwame stepped forward as well, looking at the man with suspicion. "If this is true, then why didn't he come to you sooner? Why now?" The stranger's face grew pained. "I had my reasons, but now that you've had a child of your own, it's time you knew the truth. I've been watching from the shadows, making sure you were safe. And now it's time for you to know the man who truly gave you life." Amina's knees felt weak beneath her. She reached for the nearest chair to steady herself, her mind spinning. "I don't know what to believe," Amina whispered. "I don't know what to do." The man stepped closer, his voice filled with emotion. "You don't have to decide anything. I wanted you to know. You have a choice, Amina. You don't have to follow in my footsteps or anyone's. You can choose your own path. But you deserve to know who you are." Amina's world had been turned upside down in mere moments. Her mind was a storm of confusion, doubt, and disbelief. The chief had raised her as his own, and now this man was claiming to be her father. She was torn between the man who had always been there for her and the stranger who had just appeared in her life. Before she could speak, the figure stepped closer and lowered his voice. "I know it's difficult to believe, but I am the one who was there at your birth. I was the one who initially raised you. I've always been your father." Amina's chest tightened and her heart pounded. She couldn't fathom what he was saying. Her father, Chief Owusu, had always been the man in her life. How could this stranger suddenly appear and make such a claim? Was it a lie? A cruel trick? Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps reached her ears, and she turned to find Queen Asmara, her mother, drenched and rushing toward her. The look on her face was one of distress, but there was no sign of surprise in her eyes. As the queen reached Amina, she stopped, standing protectively between her daughter and the stranger. "This man is not your father, Amina," Queen Mariama said softly but firmly. Amina felt her body go cold. "What? But how?" he said. "I know what he said, but it is not the truth," the queen replied. "The man you've always known as your father, Chief Owusu, has been the one to raise you and love you. This man, he is not your father." The stranger stood quietly, watching the exchange between mother and daughter, but the truth of his words weighed heavily on Amina. The weight of his statement had left a gap in her understanding of who she was, a gap that was only now beginning to feel real. And, just like that, the man quietly turned to leave. He abruptly stopped, turned, looked at her and said, "Give it some time and talk to your mother again." And then the room was silent, the storm outside raging as Amina stood frozen in place, her heart heavy with the weight of the truth. The night had fallen like a heavy blanket, the air cool and filled with the scent of earth after a sudden rainstorm. Amina had been pacing the small courtyard, her thoughts racing as she tried to process everything she had learned in the past few days. The sudden revelation that the man who had claimed to be her father might not be the one she had known all her life had thrown her world into chaos. Amina was caught between disbelief and the harsh reality of the words spoken by the stranger. The next morning, Amina was sitting by the river, her thoughts still clouded. Queen Asmara had promised to explain, but Amina needed time to process everything before she could hear it. Later that afternoon, the queen came to her. This time her steps were slow, measured. She sat beside Amina, her gaze calm but heavy with unspoken words. "Amina, there are truths I should have shared with you long ago," the queen began. "The man you've known as your father, he is indeed your father in all the ways that matter. He is the man who raised you, protected you, and loved you more than anything in this world." Amina nodded, but there was still confusion in her heart. She didn't understand where this new information fit into the life she knew. Then why did that man say he was my father? Why now? Queen Asmara sighed deeply, a look of regret passing across her features. "The truth is, Amina, Chief Owusu was not the first man to be your father. Before I met him, I was with another man. He was a strong and ambitious man, someone who wanted to lead the village, but he was not a man that my parents approved of. When I became pregnant with you, my parents were furious. They did not want me to be with him. They feared what it would mean for the future." Amina's mind was racing now, trying to piece together the bits of this new narrative. "So, the man last night, is he the one?" "Yes," the queen said softly. "He is the one who was with me when I became pregnant with you. But I chose to be with Owusu, the man you know as your father. He gave me a life, a future, and despite everything, I have never regretted it." Amina's eyes widened as she processed her mother's words. "But then, why did this man show up now? Why claim to be my father now?" The queen sighed, her gaze distant. "He has always known the truth. He's been trying to claim you for a long time. But I kept him away for your safety. He has his own reasons for wanting to be in your life, reasons that have nothing to do with love or family." Amina was silent for a moment, her eyes trained on the flowing water. "So what now? What do I do with this new knowledge?" The queen placed a gentle hand on Amina's. "You hold on to what matters. Owusu is your father. He's the one who loved you from the moment you were born. That is the truth that matters. You don't need to change who you are just because someone else tells you to." The real family is the one that stands by you, loves you, and supports you, no matter what. Later that evening, Amina met with her father, Chief Owusu. They sat together, the fire crackling between them, but neither said anything for a long time. Finally, Amina broke the silence. "Father, I need to ask you something." Chief Owusu looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Anything, my daughter." Amina took a deep breath, the weight of her words heavy. "Is it true that you weren't the first man to be my father?" The chief was silent for a long moment. His gaze softened, and Amina could see the pain in his eyes. "It's true, Amina," he finally admitted. "But I've always been your father in every way that counts. You were born to another man, but I chose to raise you as my own. And I never once looked back." Amina felt the lump in her throat grow as she heard the pain in her father's voice. "I know it must have been difficult for you," she whispered. Her father smiled gently, brushing a hand through his beard. "It was difficult at first, yes. But the moment I held you in my arms, I knew you were meant to be mine. You've always been my daughter, Amina." Amina reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'm sorry, father. I never meant to make you feel like you weren't my father." The chief smiled, a warm, understanding smile. "You are my daughter, and nothing will ever change that." The new storm outside continued to rage, but inside, a different kind of tempest was brewing. Amina sat in the chair, her mind spinning with the revelations that had just shattered everything she thought she knew. The man, her real father, who 24 hours earlier stood before her, his presence undeniable, and yet the room felt colder than the storm itself. Amina's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over each other like crashing waves. She felt a lump rise in her throat as she thought about the man who claimed to be her biological father. The chief had been the father she had known all her life. He had raised her, loved her, and guided her through every step of life. How could everything she had ever believed be a lie? But even more than that, a deeper, more unsettling feeling gripped her, a sense that this was somehow all too familiar. Her life felt like a twisted mirror of her mother's life. Amina's mother, the queen, had once been in love with someone other than the chief, and her parents had disapproved of their marriage. The queen had carried the weight of that disapproval her entire life, and Amina had often heard her mother speak of the pain of being judged for loving the man who became the chief. Now Amina was faced with her own version of that story, though with a new twist. Her own father, the man she had thought of as the chief, had not been the one to give her life. And the man, the one who had come to reveal the truth, had been hidden in the shadows all these years. The parallels between her own life and her mother's were impossible to ignore. It was as if she was doomed to repeat history. Would she also inherit the same regrets her mother dances around and never mentions? It was as though the universe had conspired to make her relive the same kind of struggle her mother had faced. Amina felt a pang of guilt and confusion, wondering if she had somehow been destined to go through this. Would she, too, feel the sting of disapproval from those who were supposed to love her? Her mind wandered to her mother's words, spoken late at night when Amina had overheard her talking to the chief. "I never wanted to be a queen," she had said quietly. "I never wanted this life. But love isn't always a choice, and it certainly doesn't follow the path you expect." Amina felt that truth echoing in her own heart now. She had spent her life trying to follow the rules, trying to be a dutiful daughter of the chief, but now her life felt like a game of chance. The men who loved her, the choices she had made, and the very fact that she had unknowingly followed in her mother's footsteps, it all seemed so surreal. Amina turned away from the window, her heart aching with the weight of the decisions before her. The storm outside had softened, but the storm inside her heart was only growing stronger. She felt torn between two worlds, one where she had known the chief as her father, and the other where a stranger had claimed her as his own. And now, as she thought of her mother's struggles, she felt a deep sorrow for both herself and her mother. The weight of love and family, of truth and lies, was crushing. She sat back down, feeling the crushing weight of the truth settle over her like a suffocating blanket. Was this her fate? To follow in her mother's footsteps, to be caught between love and duty, truth and deception? Was this all some twisted form of reality, or had the universe truly conspired to make her relive the pain her mother had endured? In that silence, Amina's thoughts turned to her mother, the queen. She wondered if her mother had ever felt this same sense of confusion and loss. Had her mother's love for the chief been tainted by the knowledge that he had not been the man she had originally loved? Was that pain a part of the reason why her mother had often spoken of how difficult it had been to live up to the expectations placed on her as a princess? She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath, but the storm inside her heart was far from over. her mind swirling in a dizzying tornado of thoughts. "I don't know what to do," Amina whispered, her voice barely above a breath. She felt the sting of tears behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I don't know who I am anymore." As the night wore on, the storm outside had finally passed, leaving behind a sky filled with stars. Amina remained in the quiet of the room, lost in her thoughts. It was hard to find clarity amidst the whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Feeling the weight of her mother's legacy pressing down on her. Her mother had faced her own struggles, had made her own sacrifices for love, and perhaps that was the lesson Amina needed to learn now. Love was not always a clear path. It was not always something that fit neatly into the boxes we created for it. And sometimes it required understanding the painful truths that we least expected. As the night stretched on, Amina knew that the road ahead would be filled with hard decisions. But for the first time in a long time, she realized that the power to choose her future. Her heart was in her hands. And no matter what happened, she would have to trust herself to make the right choice. The day had barely begun, yet Amina's mind felt as though it had been awake for hours. The weight of the previous revelations about her father and the constant pull between Kwame and Tund left her feeling emotionally drained. As she walked through the village, her eyes were drawn to the familiar faces of the villagers. People who had watched her grow up, supported her, and loved her unconditionally. But despite the comfort of these faces, Amina couldn't shake the feeling that she was caught in a whirlwind she couldn't control. She needed a moment of peace, some sense of normalcy. That's when she decided to stop by the daycare. She occasionally dropped Kofi off there. She loved watching the children play together. The small building sat at the edge of the village, its windows open to the gentle breeze. Children's laughter floated through the air, filling the space with life and energy. It was here that the future of the village was being shaped, one child at a time. When Amina stepped inside, she was greeted by the sight of children playing. Some running, some drawing, and others gathered in small groups, creating their own little worlds. Her eyes quickly found two figures among them, and her heart skipped a beat. Amina's son, Kofi, only a few months old, was on the floor with a group of other toddlers. His chubby little hands were reaching out as he played with a ball, giggling with delight. His laugh, a sweet sound that had brought so much joy to her life, echoed through the room. But what caught her attention was the other boy beside him, the child she hadn't expected to see today. Aisha's son, Aki. The two boys were sitting together, playing with a toy truck, their small hands pushing it back and forth. There was no tension between them, just the innocent, carefree joy of childhood. Amina stood frozen for a moment, watching the scene unfold before her. She couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she observed the two boys interacting, their giggles filling the air. Aisha's son looked almost identical to her, dark hair, a mischievous glint in his eyes, and a radiant smile that matched Amina's son's perfectly. For a moment, Amina saw the potential for a bond that transcended any rivalry or bitterness that might have existed between her and Aisha. They were, after all, family now, their children bound by blood, even if their mothers had once been at odds. She watched as her son reached out to take the truck from Aisha's son, who didn't protest. Instead, the little boy smiled and handed it over willingly, showing a level of maturity that seemed beyond his years. Amina's chest tightened. This was more than just a shared toy. It was the beginning of something new, something unexpected. Amina slowly walked closer, not wanting to disturb the moment. She knelt down beside her son, her hand gently resting on his tiny back. His eyes met hers, and his smile lit up his face. She couldn't help but smile back, the weight of everything else momentarily forgotten as she took in the purity of his innocence. Aisha stood nearby also, watching her son and Amina's son play. There was no tension in her gaze now, no hard edge to her usual demeanor. Instead, Aisha watched the two boys with an almost wistful expression, as though seeing something that she couldn't quite grasp but deeply understood. Amina's gaze met Aisha's, and for the briefest moment, they shared a quiet understanding, perhaps a fleeting sense of peace that neither of them had expected. "They're so innocent," Amina said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Aisha nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at her son. "Yeah, they don't know anything about the mess their mothers made," she said with a dry chuckle. Amina felt the sting of her words, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched as the two boys continued their game, completely unaware of the complicated history between their mothers. They were simply two children, enjoying the present moment, sharing in the joy of play without any of the burdens that had shaped their mothers' lives. Maybe that's for the best, Amina finally said. They don't need to carry the weight of our mistakes. They'll figure things out for themselves. Aisha's gaze softened, and for the first time, Amina saw the woman beyond the bitterness. The woman who was simply a mother trying to do right by her child. Maybe, Aisha agreed. I've spent too much time trying to figure out how to fix things, but maybe it's not up to us. Maybe it's just their turn to live their lives. The words hung in the air, unspoken but understood. For all the mistakes, the heartache, and the misunderstandings that had shaped their lives, perhaps it was time for a new generation to create their own path. One that didn't have to be dictated by the choices of their mothers. Amina stood up, her son still clutching the truck in his tiny hands. She turned to Aisha, who had been watching her, waiting for her next move. I'm sorry for the way things have been between us, Amina said, her voice sincere. We've both made mistakes, but our children, they deserve a chance at something better. They deserve to grow up without all the baggage we've carried. Aisha didn't immediately respond. Instead, she just nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. For a moment, it felt as though the years of animosity between them had been set aside, and in its place was something new, something fragile but real. Amina reached down to pick up her son, cradling him in her arms. She returned him to the floor with his playmate. His brother. Aisha's smile was small but genuine. Maybe we can, she replied. As Amina turned to leave, she glanced back at her son and Aisha's boy, still playing together on the floor. She realized that no matter how complicated their lives had become, the future was still theirs to shape. The children were a reminder that even in the midst of turmoil, new beginnings were always possible. They were the hope that something better could come out of all the pain and uncertainty. And in that moment, Amina felt a glimmer of hope, a small but powerful spark that perhaps, just perhaps, things could still work out. The weeks following the revelation were filled with quiet reflection for Amina. She had learned the painful truth about her biological father, but it didn't change the way she felt about Chief Owusu. He had always been her father, and that bond was irreplaceable. She spent time with her parents, reconnecting with both of them in ways she never had before. Her relationship with her mother, Queen Asmara, grew stronger as they began to share more of their pasts and their experiences. Amina learned to appreciate her mother's sacrifices and the love that had bound them all together. With the knowledge of her true parentage, Amina began to accept that her identity was not tied to the past. It was shaped by the choices she made moving forward, by the love she gave to her son, and by the future she would build for herself. The days following the quiet moment at the daycare were filled with a sense of change that Amina couldn't quite grasp, but she felt it deep within her. It wasn't just the bond forming between her son and Aisha's, or the gentle shift in her relationship with Aisha. It was something more profound, an understanding that life, in all its complexity, was unfolding before her in ways she hadn't expected. Amina had spent so much of her life trying to control her destiny, trying to make sense of the love triangle with Kwame and Tund, and the complicated web of her own identity. But now, as she stood at the crossroads of motherhood, love, and family, she realized that there were pieces of her story that she couldn't change. But there were also pieces of her future that were still unwritten. Zainab, ever the supportive friend, had been there through it all, listening, advising, and keeping Amina grounded. As they sat in their usual spot beneath the large baobab tree in the village square, Zainab looked at her with knowing eyes. "You've come a long way, Amina," Zainab said, her tone soft but filled with truth. "The woman you were a year ago, the one caught up in all that confusion and anger, is not the same woman sitting here now. You've changed." Amina smiled faintly, her eyes distant as she thought back on the tumult of the past year. The revelations, the heartache, the betrayals. "I've had to. Life doesn't give you much choice sometimes, does it?" she said, her voice tinged with both sadness and a hint of relief. "No, it doesn't," Zainab agreed, then paused before adding, "but you've learned to listen to your heart. That's the most important thing." Amina glanced down at Kofi, who was peacefully asleep in her arms. He was her world now, his small, innocent face a reminder that no matter how twisted her journey had been, this little one was her future, her reason to keep moving forward. "I'm still not sure what's going to happen with Kwame and Tund," Amina admitted, her voice softer this time. "But for the first time, I'm starting to feel like it doesn't matter. I have him now. I have my son." Zainab's eyes softened, understanding her friend's inner conflict. "It's true. You're not alone anymore. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't follow your heart. You have a right to happiness, Amina. Don't forget that." Amina nodded, but her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Amina!" She looked up to see Kwame standing in front of her, his eyes tired but filled with determination. It had been a while since he'd visited, and though Amina had tried to push him from her thoughts, there was still a part of her that held on to what they had shared. "Kwame," she said, her tone neutral but not unkind. She shifted her son slightly, so he rested more comfortably in her arms. "I came to check on you," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "I know things have been complicated, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, Amina. I always have been." Amina met his gaze, and for a moment, everything else faded away. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the love he still held for her, despite everything that had happened. But she also felt the weight of their history, the misunderstandings, the pain, the masks they'd both worn. She couldn't simply forget all that. "I know you're here, Kwame," she replied, her voice steady. "But I can't keep going back and forth. I have a son now. He's my priority, my future." Kwame nodded, his eyes falling to her son. "I understand that, and I respect it, but also understand that he's my son too. My priority too. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always care for you, Amina. And if you ever need me, if he needs me, I'll be here." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that Amina couldn't ignore. She had always known that Kwame's love for her was real, that his feelings were deep and genuine. But now, in the quiet of this moment, with the future unfolding in her arms, she felt something else, a sense of clarity. Kwame had been part of her past, a beautiful, painful part. But the future, the one she wanted to build, was with her son. "I know, Kwame," she said, her voice softening. "No disrespect, but I just need to figure this out on my own right now." He gave her a small, sad smile. "I know you do, and I'm not going to get in the way. I just want you to be happy, Amina." As he turned to leave, Amina's heart felt a pang of regret. She wasn't sure if she had made the right decision, but she knew it was the only one she could make. She had to move forward, even if it meant letting go of the past. A few hours later, Amina found herself walking through the village, lost in thought. Her heart felt heavy, but at the same time, it was lighter than it had been in years. She had made peace with the past, or at least, she was starting to. And as she walked, the faces of the villagers seemed more familiar, more welcoming. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she truly belonged. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the village, Amina stopped at the edge of the river. She could hear the gentle flow of the water, a soothing sound that calmed her racing thoughts. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'm ready," she whispered to herself. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." The days following Kwame's visit felt like they stretched out before Amina, long and endless. Yet, there was a sense of clarity slowly rising within her, like the calm after a storm. She was adjusting to the idea of being a mother and stepping into a new chapter of her life. Her son, with his tiny hands wrapped around her fingers, was the only thing that mattered now. One quiet morning, Amina was surprised to find Queen Asmara standing at her doorstep. The queen, her mother's equal in stature and presence, had never visited her without formality, but today was different. "Your Majesty," Amina said, lowering her gaze slightly as a sign of respect. The queen, however, raised her hand gently, signaling for Amina to stand. "There's no need for that today, Amina," she said softly. "I've come to speak with you as a mother." Amina blinked in surprise. Although their relationship was getting better, she had never been really close to the queen, who was always surrounded by guards and formalities, but there was something in the queen's eyes today, something that spoke of secrets and truths long buried. "Sit with me," Queen Asmara urged, gesturing to the bench near the door. "There are things we must discuss, things I should have shared with you long ago." Amina, feeling the weight of her curiosity, sat down next to the queen. Her heart pounded, unsure of what was coming next. "My dear," the queen began, her voice softer than Amina had ever heard it, "you deserve the truth, even if it's painful. You've had questions about your father, about your identity, and now, I feel it's time you know the whole story." Amina's breath caught in her throat. She had long suspected there was more to the tale than she had been told, but hearing the queen speak of it so openly startled her. "You see, Amina," Queen Mariama continued, "your father was not always the chief. In fact, when I first met him, he was nothing but a man with a dream to bring change to this village. A dream I believed in." The queen's eyes darkened slightly as she continued. "But my parents didn't approve of him. They saw him as too ambitious, too driven, too unrefined. They were deeply displeased when I chose him as my husband. They thought I was making a mistake." Amina listened closely, not fully understanding where this was leading, but sensing that something important was unfolding. I knew the weight of my parents' disapproval, but I loved him, Queen Mariama confessed. He was not the man he is now. But when I became pregnant with you, and we were forced into marriage, things changed. Amina's eyes widened. She had always known her parents had an unconventional love story, but hearing her mother's side of it for the first time was both surprising and bittersweet. Your father's rise to power was not an easy one, the Queen continued. He had to fight for it through struggles, through battles, through losses. But when he became chief, I knew he would be the man to lead this village. And though my parents' objections still echo in my mind, I know now that he was the right choice. Amina looked at the Queen, her heart racing with 1,000 questions. But why are you telling me this now? She asked, voice trembling slightly. The Queen met Amina's gaze, her eyes filled with a depth of understanding. Because it is time for you to know the truth about your father. It is time you understand who you truly are. Amina's mind raced, but she didn't speak. She needed to hear more. Your father's identity, his true strength, it is more than just his position as chief. It's the sacrifices he's made, the love he's shown, and the pride he has in you and your future. You may not have realized it, but all the trials you've faced, your struggles with Kwame, with Tund, even your confusion about who your father truly was, were part of your journey to becoming who you are meant to be. Your father's journey mirrors your own, and that's something you both share. Amina's heart filled with mixed emotions, grief, understanding, and an unexpected sense of pride. You have the strength of your father in you, the Queen concluded. And now, Amina, it's time to let that strength guide you. Trust in yourself, in your heart, and in the choices you make from this moment forward. Amina sat quietly for a long while, processing her mother's words. The weight of the revelation settled deep inside her, but so did a new sense of purpose. She was not just the daughter of a chief. She was a woman who could shape her own destiny. The days following Amina's revelation had been filled with moments of reflection and soul-searching. The village felt calmer, the air less charged with tension. She had a family that supported her, a son who loved her unconditionally, and 2 men, Kwame and Tund, whose hearts were torn between wanting to be with her. Amina knew she had to make a decision, one that would not only affect her life, but the lives of those around her. As the daughter of the chief, a princess in the village, Amina knew that her actions had consequences, not just for herself but for the village as well. Marriage, especially to someone of her stature, was always a political and social affair, one that would affect the future of the village's leadership. But Amina didn't want her marriage to be an obligation or a duty. She wanted it to be a choice, one that came from her heart. Unexpectedly, she called for a meeting in the great hall of her family's estate. Her parents, Chief Owusu and Queen Asmara, were already seated, their eyes filled with curiosity and concern. Kwame and Tund were also present, standing a little apart, their expressions uncertain as they waited for her to speak. Amina took a deep breath, her fingers nervously brushing the fabric of her dress. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady. "I know this situation is difficult for everyone, and I owe it to you to be honest about what's been weighing on my heart." Her parents exchanged glances, and Kwame and Tund looked at each other, unsure of what to expect. "I have thought long and hard about this," Amina continued, her gaze shifting from Kwame to Tund. "I am grateful for both of you, for your love and support. You've both stood by me in ways I never expected. But now it's time for me to make a decision about my future, about who I am as a woman, and who I want to be with." The silence in the room was palpable as Amina gathered her thoughts. "As you all know, being the chief's daughter carries responsibilities. My marriage will affect the future of this village, and I do not take that lightly. But I also know that my happiness is just as important. I cannot marry for duty alone. I need to marry someone I truly love and trust, someone who understands me and supports my dreams." Her parents looked at each other again, the weight of her words sinking in. The chief quickly leaned forward, his tone serious. "Amina, we understand the weight of the crown and the duty you carry. But remember, love is just as important. Your heart will guide you. You are the future of this village, and we want you to be happy." Queen Asmara nodded in agreement. "We have always wanted what is best for you, Amina. But we also want you to be true to yourself. You deserve to find someone who loves you fully, without reservation." Amina's gaze turned to Kwame and Tund. "I know that both of you love me, and I do not take that lightly. But I need to tell you the truth about where I am in my heart." Kwame stepped forward, his face earnest. "Amina, I love you. I always have, and I always will. Whatever you decide, I just want you to know that." Tund, his expression equally serious, nodded. "I love you too, Amina. I'm here for you, no matter what." Amina took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. "I have made my choice," she said quietly. "I have spent so much time running away from what my heart has been telling me. But now I realize that the man I want to be with, the one who makes me feel like I can truly be myself, is the one who has always been there for me. The one who has always understood me, who I have loved from the very beginning." Kwame's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of hope in his eyes, but Amina's gaze remained steady as she spoke. "Kwame, I choose you. You have always been there for me, even when I couldn't see it. I choose you because I know deep in my heart that you are the one who will stand by me no matter what happens. I have always felt this way, even when I was confused and lost." Amina turned to Tund, her voice softening. "Tund, you are an incredible man, and I will always be grateful for everything you've done. But I know in my heart that the future I want is with Kwame. I hope you understand." Tund nodded, his face stoic but his eyes reflecting the pain of her words. "I do understand, Amina, and I will always care for you. I just want you to be happy." The room was silent for a moment as Amina's words hung in the air. Finally, her father, Chief Owusu, spoke. "You have made a wise decision, Amina. The future of this village is in your hands, and we trust that you will make the right choices. Kwame is a good man, and he will support you as you carry out your duties." Queen Asmara smiled, her eyes soft with pride. "You've grown so much, my daughter. We are proud of you. Your heart knows what it needs, and we are here to support you in this journey." Amina felt a rush of emotion as she looked around at the people she loved. The decision had been difficult, but now that it was made, she felt a sense of peace. She had chosen the path that was right for her, and that was all that mattered. Kwame stepped forward, his face breaking into a relieved smile. "Thank you, Amina. I promise you, I will stand by you in everything. We will build a life together, one full of love, respect, and happiness." Amina smiled, feeling the weight of her decision lift from her shoulders. "I know, Kwame, and I'm ready to start that life with you." The next few days were filled with quiet reflection. Amina spent her time caring for her son, learning to adjust to the routines of motherhood, but something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt the same desperation to know who she was in the eyes of others. Her identity had always been more than her father's position or the men who fought for her heart. She was stronger than that, stronger than the pain, the betrayal, and the confusion she had felt. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amina walked to the riverbank, holding her son gently in her arms. The air was cool, and the village was still, the only sound being the gentle rush of the water. Zainab walked up beside her, her footsteps soft against the earth. "You've been quiet," Zainab said, standing beside her. "What's on your mind?" Amina glanced down at her son, a smile playing at her lips. "I'm finally starting to understand that the answers I was looking for were always inside me. I just had to look deep enough." Zainab smiled, her hand resting on Amina's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Amina. You've come a long way." Amina nodded, then looked out over the water. "I've learned that sometimes the answers we seek are not found in the past, but in what we choose to do with the present." Zainab turned to her, understanding the weight of her words. "So, what will you do now?" Amina's gaze softened as she looked down at her son, who was peacefully resting in her arms. "Now, I'll focus on building the future. A future where my son can grow up in a world where he knows who he is, where he's loved, and where he's free to choose his path." She took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air settle in her chest. "I've made my peace with the past, Zainab. I'm ready to move forward." The days following Amina's decision were filled with excitement and anticipation. News of her choice to marry Kwame spread quickly throughout the village, and preparations for their wedding began in earnest. There was a sense of joy that spread throughout the land, as the villagers celebrated the union of their princess with a man they had long respected. Amina, though excited, still felt the weight of her duties. As the daughter of the chief, she had to ensure that her marriage was not only a personal choice, but one that would strengthen the community and secure the future of the village. She worked closely with her parents, the village elders, and Kwame to ensure that the wedding was a celebration of love and unity. As the days drew closer to the wedding, Amina found herself feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had made her choice, but now she had to face the reality of being a wife, a mother, and the future leader of the village. It was a lot to carry, but with Kwame by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. The days following Amina's decision were filled with excitement and anticipation. News of her choice to marry Kwame spread quickly throughout the village, and preparations for their wedding began in earnest. There was a sense of joy that spread throughout the land, as the villagers celebrated the union of their princess with a man they had long respected. Amina, though excited, still felt the weight of her duties. As the daughter of the chief, she had to ensure that her marriage was not only a personal choice, but one that would strengthen the community and secure the future of the village. She worked closely with her parents, the village elders, and Kwame to ensure that the wedding was a celebration of love and unity. One afternoon, as she reviewed the ceremony plans with Queen Asmara and the royal attendants, Amina suddenly put her hands on the table, a determined expression on her face. "There is something I want to make very clear," she said, her voice firm. "My son will, of course, have a place of honor in the ceremony, but I want Aisha's son included as well." The room fell silent for a moment. Queen Mariama's brows raised slightly, and one of the attendants hesitated before asking, "Princess, do you mean that the boy will stand alongside your son?" "Yes," Amina said without hesitation. "They are brothers, and despite having different mothers, they will be treated as such. This family will recognize them both, and so will the village." Chief Owusu, who had been listening quietly, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Amina, you are asking the village to publicly acknowledge both children as part of the royal family. Are you prepared for the reactions that may come?" Amina met her father's gaze without wavering. "Yes. I don't care about whispers or traditions that may try to separate them. My son will grow up knowing his brother, and Aisha's son will not be treated as anything less. If I am to lead this village one day, I want to set that precedent now." Queen Mariama studied her daughter for a moment before nodding approvingly. "Then it shall be done. If this is your wish, Amina, we will stand by it." Chief Osei sighed but smiled slightly, shaking his head. "You are your mother's daughter," he muttered. "Stubborn and determined." Amina smirked. "I take that as a compliment, Baba." And with that it was decided. On the day of the wedding, both boys, her son and Aisha's, would walk alongside her in the ceremony, representing not just their bond as siblings, but the unity Amina wished to see in the future of the village. As time passed, Amina's life slowly found its rhythm. Her relationship with her son grew stronger each day, and she began to understand the depth of her role as a mother. She had learned to forgive herself for her mistakes and to accept the choices she had made along the way. The village began to embrace the changes, and the whispers about her complicated love life slowly faded into the background. One morning, as Amina walked through the village with her son, she noticed a group of children laughing and playing by the river. Among them was Aisha's son, and Amina smiled when she saw him. The two boys, though young, had formed a bond that was unspoken but real. It was a bond that transcended the adult conflicts and confusion that had once clouded their mothers' lives. As Amina watched the children, she realized that, despite everything, life had a way of healing. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that it would be a future she would shape on her own terms. "Everything will be all right," she whispered to herself, as her son giggled in her arms. And with that, Amina knew that the journey ahead would be full of hope, growth, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The wedding day arrived, and the entire village gathered to witness the union of Amina and Kwame. The sky was clear, and the air was filled with the sound of drums and chanting as the ceremony began. Amina, dressed in a beautiful gown, stood beside Kwame, her heart racing. She looked around at the faces of her family, her friends, and the villagers who had come to celebrate this moment with her. As the ceremony progressed, Amina felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made the right choice. She was marrying the man who loved her, who understood her, and who would stand by her through everything. When the moment came for them to exchange vows, Amina took a deep breath and looked into Kwame's eyes. "I promise to stand by you, to love you, and to build a future together. No matter what happens, we will face it together." Kwame smiled, his eyes shining with love. "I promise to always be there for you, to support you, and to love you with all my heart. You are my future, Amina." As they exchanged their vows, the crowd erupted in applause, and Amina knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life. With Kwame by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. Months passed, and life in the village continued. Amina had learned the art of balancing being a wife, motherhood, and her duties, though the challenges remained. Yet, she had found a peace that had once seemed impossible. One evening, as she sat by the fire with Zainab, she reflected on everything that had happened. "I never thought I'd come to this point," she said softly. "So much has changed." Zainab smiled, squeezing her hand. "You've come so far, Amina, and you've made the right choices. The future is yours now. Amina nodded, feeling the weight of those words. She knew the road ahead would still be full of obstacles, but she also knew she was ready for whatever came next. The past no longer controlled her. It had shaped her, yes, but it was the future, her future, that she now held in her hands. As the fire flickered and the night sky stretched above them, Amina felt a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in her life, she was free to be who she was meant to be. The past was behind her. The future was hers to create. Amina sat in the small house, surrounded by the warmth of family. Her son was playing nearby, laughing as Aisha's son joined him, the two boys becoming fast friends. Amina glanced up to see her father, the chief, standing in the doorway, his face softer than it had ever been before. He nodded to her, a silent understanding between them. He had seen the growth in his daughter, the woman she had become, and he was proud. As Amina looked around at the life she had built, she knew that no matter what had happened in the past, she had everything she needed in the present. Her husband, her son, her family, her village. And as the sun set, casting a golden light over the land, Amina knew that the story of her life was just beginning.